Chers collègues, je vous rappelle que le port d'un masque FFP2 est obligatoire, nez, bouche, menton couvert dans les locaux du Conseil, dans l'hémicycle et ceci, y compris lors d'une prise de parole. Excusez-nous. L'ordre du jour appelle l'élection au scrutin secret d'un vice-président de l'Assemblée au titre de la Fédération de Russie. Le candidat est M. Piotr Tolstoï. En vertu de l'article 16.4 du règlement, la majorité absolue des suffrages exprimés est requise au premier tour du scrutin. Compte tenu du format hybride de notre session, les scrutins auront lieu par voie électronique via la plateforme Skittle. Je vous rappelle que vous devez utiliser pour voter votre adresse électronique privée. Si vous rencontrez des difficultés techniques, veuillez vous référer aux instructions données sur la page spéciale Session du site web. Conformément au règlement, chaque groupe politique a désigné un scrutateur. Les scrutateurs sont, pour le groupe PPE, M. Volker Ulrich, pour le groupe des socialistes démocrates et Verts, Mme Céline Sayek-Beuke, pour le groupe ADLE, Mme Beatrice Fresco-Rolfo, pour le groupe GUE, M. Ishar Özsoy, et pour le groupe M. John Howell. Le scrutin est désormais ouvert. Il sera clos à 12 heures. Nous continuons nos travaux pendant ce temps. Dear colleagues, our next business this morning is the joint debate on two reports from the Committee on Equality and Non-Discrimination. The first is titled, Combating Rising Hate Speech Against LGBTI People in Europe. You find in document 15425, presented by Mr. Fouad Ben-Chika. Welcome. The second is titled, Alleged Violations of the Rights of LGBTI People in the Southern Caucasus, presented by Mr. Christophe Lacroix. Welcome as well, sir. These will be followed by a statement from Madam Elena Dalli, European Commissioner for Equality. The rapporteurs will each have 7 minutes to present their reports and will then have a further 3 minutes to reply at the end of the debate. In order to finish by 12 noon and allow time for consideration of amendments, we must conclude the list of speakers at about 11:15 to allow time for reply and the vote. Now, I first call Mr. Fouad Ben-Chika, rapporteur, to present the first report. Mr. Ben-Chika, you have 7 minutes and you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, dear colleagues, on 18 of September, trans hairdresser Ivana Angeline Macedo was found stabbed to death in her apartment in Paris. This brutal murder is just the most recent among 14 tragic killings of trans people reported in our member states between November 2020 and 2021. As we pay our respect to Ivana and to all those who have died in the past year, let us remember that still today LGBTI+ people face hate crimes, verbal and physical attacks, harassment, discrimination, stigmatization throughout our member states. It's clear that right now the advances made in previous years are under threat, and LGBTI+ people have good reason to feel under threat too. LGBTI phobia is on the rise in Europe. My report established that the attack and hate crimes are not happening by chance. The anti-gender, anti-LGBT discourse and policy are a part of an organized attack against all those who have challenged the heteronormative, cisnormative structures and dynamics that are still so entrenched in our society. My report also point out how alarming and significant proportion of hate speech, vilification, scapegoating of LGBTI plus people has come from political figures, religious leaders, and media outlets. We are seeing overly hostile discourse from those in power, as well in official policy in countries such as Poland, where dozens of local and regional authorities have declared themselves LGBT-free zones over the last 3 years and have adopted family charters that are harmful to the rights, safety, and well-being of LGBTI people. We are seeing an increased limitation on the freedom of assembly and freedom of expression of LGBTI plus people. There is a backsliding in rights in many countries. Now here is this trend more evident than in Hungary, where there have been not one, but 3 series of amendments to Hungary's constitution and laws since May 2020. All of them significantly curtail the rights of LGBTI people, as I've outlined in my report. I would like to thank the Venice Commission for its most recent opinion on Hungary, adopted at the request of our committee, and I wish to make clear that the latest anti-gay propaganda legislation is a clear violation of LGBTI people's human rights. We are also seeing an increasingly virulent attacks on the right of trans people, including in countries where there was previously understanding and support. My report describes how this trend is affecting trans people in Spain and the United Kingdom, and the hardship and hostility they are facing. For far too long, and in far too many countries, hate and intolerance towards the LGBTI plus community has been allowed to flourish. No one should feel a need to hide their identity to avoid discrimination, hate, or violence. This report is crucial as LGBTI plus rights are human rights, and we should work together to make LGBTI plus equality a reality in all our member states. Finally, an underlining action the government can take, I have drawn attention to the need to use existing instruments and standards, including the resolution already adopted by the Assembly, as benchmark for the situation both within and beyond their borders, the importance of calling out LGBTI plus phobic policy, practice, discourse, wherever it occurs, to need for governments to make a renewed commitment to achieving LGBTI plus equality in practice. Dear colleagues, this report is a result of a relentless effort and work of activists, experts, and many of my colleagues present today. I would especially like to thank the Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights, Dunja Micovic, and United Nations independent expert on discrimination based on sexual orientation and identity, Victor Madriela Borlos. And of course, I want to thank the Commissioner, European Commission, Madame Dali, for her presence here today. As well, of course, as the many NGOs who are participating in our hearings and in the bilateral meetings with me, for their powerful and deeply inspiring contribution to our committee works on this report. I also wish to thank the committee secretary for this excellent support throughout this process. You know who you are. I'm so thankful for all the support and dedication that I have experienced the last year. So, I ask you today, dear colleagues, to join hands in this fight. It's time to act. This report is crucial and urgent. I want a Europe where no one is left behind, where everyone has the right to be who they want to be. This is why I call upon you and your support to support this draft resolution and recommendation. And let me conclude with this very beautiful quote of Tennessee Williams. What is straight? A line can be straight, or a street. But a human heart? Oh no, it's curved like a road through mountains. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rapporteur, for your clear introduction. I now give the floor to Monsieur Lacroix to present the second report. You have 7 minutes, Mr. Rapporteur.
Président, mes chers collègues, le débat conjoint que nous avons l'opportunité de mener aujourd'hui nous offre une opportunité tout à fait exceptionnelle de faire le point sur la situation des personnes LGBTQI en Europe et de donner des indications très concrètes sur les mesures à adopter pour améliorer cette situation. Et j'en profite pour remercier mon collègue Fourat Benchika, qui est plus qu'un collègue, qui est un ami, pour son travail, qui est un signal d'alerte fort sur des phénomènes particulièrement inquiétants qui se vérifient à l'échelle européenne, en ce compris dans des démocraties les plus avancées de l'Union européenne. Et j'étais très surpris d'ailleurs, mon cher Fourat, de lire à cet égard certaines lignes de ton rapport qui montrent qu'effectivement le tocsin peut résonner pour alerter sur les droits des personnes LGBTQI. Mais j'ajouterai des éléments que j'estime importants à ce débat en traitant de 3 pays en particulier. La situation des personnes LGBTI et le respect de leurs droits humains sont inégaux dans les États membres du Conseil de l'Europe et ces inégalités devraient être éliminées. Les progrès accomplis au cours des dernières années et des dernières décennies en Europe en matière de droits des personnes LGBTI sont remarquables, mais ils ne sont pas homogènes. Et ce constat m'a amené à préparer un rapport focalisé sur le Caucase Sud, à savoir l'Arménie, l'Azerbaïdjan et la Géorgie, puisqu'ils partagent une partie de leur histoire récente, ayant reconquis leur indépendance à la même époque, après avoir fait partie de l'Union soviétique une bonne partie du XXe siècle. Et donc ce rapport veut faire un état des lieux, même si ces 3 pays sont très différents, mais également, ce qui est encore plus important, à accompagner et à soutenir les opportunités d'évolution positive. L'examen annuel de la situation des droits humains des personnes LGBTI en 2021, réalisé par ILGA Europe, nous donne une clé de lecture éclairante. D'après cet examen, l'Azerbaïdjan se place à la dernière position du classement des pays les plus respectueux des droits des personnes LGBTI, avec un score d'à peine 2%. L'Arménie est classée 47e sur 49 et totalise environ 7%, et en Géorgie, le score est de 26%, notamment grâce à la législation anti-discrimination et contre le discours de haine. Dans la préparation de ce rapport, nous avons évidemment utilisé les constats des organisations internationales, les organismes spécialisés, tant de la Commission européenne, tant de l'Organisation des Nations unies, et nous avons bien entendu collaboré avec ILGA. Par la suite, j'ai tenu des réunions en ligne avec des représentants des autorités de la société civile de l'Arménie, puis je me suis rendu personnellement en Géorgie pour y effectuer une visite d'information, car les restrictions aux voyages internationaux avaient entre-temps été levées. Par contre, la délégation d'Azerbaïdjan n'a donné aucune suite à ma demande d'effectuer une visite virtuelle ou réelle dans le pays. Nous avons été amenés à constater que les personnes LGBTQI font face à plusieurs formes de discrimination graves dans les pays concernés par ce rapport, bien que le niveau d'inégalité est différent dans ces 3 pays. Or, ce que j'ai voulu mettre en lumière dans le texte que je vous présente, c'est que la lutte contre la discrimination est une des clés de voûte des systèmes démocratiques et qu'elle est au cœur des valeurs soutenues par le Conseil de l'Europe. La discrimination fondée sur l'orientation sexuelle, l'identité de genre, l'expression de genre et les caractéristiques sexuelles doit être prévenue et doit être combattue fermement, au même titre que celle fondée sur tout autre motif. Pour cela, il incombe à tous les États membres d'assurer le respect des droits humains et des libertés fondamentales. Et nous ne devons pas appliquer ou accepter une sorte de relativisme éthique qui voudrait qu'on applique des critères différents en matière de discrimination des personnes à certains pays en raison du traditionnalisme d'une partie de leur population. Et le texte de ce projet indique donc très clairement, Monsieur le Président, mes chers collègues, que l'Assemblée parlementaire estime que les traditions culturelles et religieuses d'un pays ne sauraient justifier la discrimination fondée sur l'orientation sexuelle, l'identité de genre, l'expression de genre et des caractéristiques sexuelles. En effet, il n'y a pas de contradiction inévitable entre le droit au respect de la vie privée et familiale, la liberté de conscience, de pensée, de religion, la liberté d'expression et celle de réunion et d'association, ainsi les manifestations publiques contre la discrimination des personnes LGBTI et visant à promouvoir leurs droits, tels que les marches de la fierté, ne constituent pas une violation des droits. Ces pays ont adhéré au Conseil de l'Europe. Ils doivent donc respecter les prescrits de la Convention européenne des droits de l'homme. Cela étant dit, nous saluons les progrès accomplis par la Géorgie avec l'adoption d'une législation qui inclut l'orientation sexuelle et l'identité de genre parmi les motifs interdits de discrimination et l'introduction dans la législation pénale de la LGBTI-phobie en tant que circonstance aggravante. Mais attention, il faut que cette norme soit mise pleinement en œuvre, ce qui exige une volonté politique forte et une cohérence. En ce qui concerne l'Arménie, le processus de transition démocratique en cours depuis quelque temps est une opportunité à ne pas manquer pour renforcer le système de protection des droits humains et de lutter contre les discriminations. Il faut également que les autorités garantissent l'exercice des libertés fondamentales par les personnes LGBTQI lorsque cet exercice est limité ou menacé par d'autres groupes qui s'y opposent. Et je fais référence tout d'abord aux manifestations publiques telles que les marches de la fierté. Il est très important également de garantir la liberté et l'indépendance des médias et de protéger la sécurité de leur personnel. Le projet préconise un certain nombre de mesures qui s'appliquent soit aux 3 pays du Caucase Sud, soit à certains d'entre eux. Je ne citerai pas toutes les recommandations, mais certaines méritent d'être rappelées, notamment mener des enquêtes effectives dans le cas des violences à l'encontre des personnes LGBTQI, mettre en œuvre des plans d'action concernant la discrimination, instaurer des procédures rapides et transparentes et accessibles, garantir l'enseignement de l'éducation complète à la sexualité et finalement renforcer la coopération avec les organisations de la société civile actives dans la protection des droits humains, dont ceux des personnes LGBTQI. Et avant de conclure, je voudrais saluer le travail remarquable des organisations de la société civile qui, dans ces pays, effectuent un travail magnifique pour sensibiliser leurs concitoyens, faire évoluer les mentalités, assister les victimes de discrimination et mener un plaidoyer auprès des institutions. À vous tous, collègues membres de l'Assemblée parlementaire, je demande donc de soutenir ce projet de résolution qui vise à améliorer la vie d'un grand nombre de personnes dans notre continent. Je vous remercie pour votre attention.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le rapporteur, pour votre présentation. And now, it is my pleasure to welcome in the debate Madam Elena Dalli, the European Commissioner for Equality. Madam Dalli has a strong track record in upholding human rights for all. Under her leadership as a Minister of European Affairs and Equality, Malta became one of the only few countries in the world to have entrenched LGBTI rights in its constitution. As EU Commissioner for Equality since 2019, responsible for strengthening Europe's commitment to inclusion and equality, Madam Dalli oversees the European Commission's work on ending violence and discrimination against LGBTI people. The adoption of the first EU official LGBTQ equality strategy last year marked an important step in the fight for diversity and inclusion. In our Parliamentary Assembly, Madam Commissioner, we have taken several steps to raise awareness and address the violations and hatred that too many LGBTI people still experience in our member states. At the end of the day, LGBTI rights are human rights, which is why this is an issue that should concern all of us. Therefore, Madam Commissioner, we look forward to your intervention and this exchange of views on how we can further cooperate to ensure that the rights of the LGBTI people are fully respected. Once again, we are honored to have you here in this debate, and I give you the floor.
Thank you, and good morning, dear Chair, dear members of the Parliamentary Assembly. I really appreciate the solid and long-standing partnership between the Council of Europe, the European Commission, and the promotion of the rights of LGBTIQ persons. We must continue to strive to strengthen our cooperation and ensure that our actions are mutually reinforcing. European Governmental LGBTI Focal Point Network is the main platform for our partnership, and I commend its significant contribution to advance the human rights of LGBTIQ persons. Yes, all human rights must apply to LGBTIQ persons in all their diversity. and LGBTIQ people should be able to fully enjoy their rights everywhere and at all times, no different than any other person, regardless of the personal characteristics. This may sound like a cliche until one gets to the issues faced by LGBTIQ people and realizes that, in fact, most of the problems they face stem from exceptionalism and discriminatory restrictions to the recognition of LGBTIQ rights as human rights. Attention to this fact is doubly important considering the backsliding on LGBTIQ rights we are currently witnessing in parts of the world, including in Europe. At European Union level, we observe that legislative developments, case law, and policy initiatives have improved many LGBTIQ people's lives and helped build more equal and welcoming societies. Despite this, for several LGBTIQ people in the EU, it is still unsafe to show affection publicly, to be open about their sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, and sex characteristics, and to simply be themselves without feeling threatened. The COVID-19 crisis brought new pressures, and LGBTIQ people are, of course, no exception to this. The European Commission shares with the Council of Europe the ambition to be at the forefront of efforts to better protect LGBTIQ people's rights. To deliver on this ambition, the Commission has adopted an LGBTIQ equality strategy in November of 2020. The strategy is now in the implementation phase, mobilizing legal, policy, and funding instruments and combining targeted actions with enhanced equality mainstreaming. As part of this implementation, the Commission is working to further strengthen the general knowledge, awareness, and understanding of the lived realities of LGBTIQ people in the EU. In particular, better data will help us target our action and render them more effective. Important data collection on LGBTIQ people's discrimination and living conditions is therefore at the core of the work of the LGBTIQ equality and the equality data subgroups, which are composed of national experts, Eurostat, and the EU Fundamental Rights Agency. Turning now to funding instruments, our new Citizens' Equality, Rights and Values program, with an overall budget of 1.55 billion euro, sets a specific priority for co-funding actions that contribute to implementing objectives set out in the LGBTIQ equality strategy. This creates new opportunities for concrete projects by all those willing and capable to contribute improving the lives of LGBTIQ people. Civil society organizations are at the forefront in this regard. So is the Council of Europe. Earlier, we heard Rapporteur Furab and Chika explaining the need for action in response to the marked increase in hate speech, violence, and hate crime against LGBTIQ people. Hate speech and hate crime are indeed a serious and worrying phenomenon in Europe and beyond, whether in physical or virtual spaces. At the EU level, a framework decision of 2008 requires the criminalization of hate crime and hate speech on grounds of color, religion, descent, as well as national, racial, or ethnic origin. However, hate crime and hate speech on other grounds, such as sex or sexual orientation, are not covered at EU level, and legal protection varies significantly between member states. This is why last month the Commission adopted a communication inviting the Council to adopt a decision extending the current list of EU crimes in the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union to hate crimes and hate speech. If this Council decision is adopted, the Commission would then be able to propose legislation on the matter. When it comes to hate crime and hate speech, the Council of Europe, together with a number of other organizations, is an essential partner of the Commission in the working group that supports EU member states in developing hate crime and capacity building for law enforcement. I cannot stress enough how important it is to help law enforcement personnel in identifying and recording LGBTIQ-phobic bias and increasing crime reporting. We also heard today a report from Mr. Christophe Lacroix taking stock of the situation of LGBTIQ people in the Southern Caucasus and underlying how opportunities for positive change can be supported. On its side, the EU is closely following the situation regarding LGBTIQ rights across the South Caucasus and is holding regular human rights dialogues with the countries concerned. The EU is always ready to speak out when there are major concerns and to work with partners to improve the situation in concrete ways. This illustrates that EU commitment to protection of LGBTIQ persons goes beyond the EU's borders. In this context, the Commission's cooperation and engagement with the Council of Europe is essential, notably to share best practices on tackling, advancing LGBTIQ rights. Other relevant international and regional bodies, such as the United Nations, are also essential to form a common front to enhance rights of LGBTIQ people. In this context, I am pleased that Mr. Madrigal-Borlos, the UN independent expert on protection against violence and discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, is taking part in today's session. It is only by working together that we will bring about the level of change needed to ensure that all people, whoever they are and wherever they live, can be themselves and love who they want without the risk of discrimination, exclusion, or violence. I thank you for your attention.
And I thank you, Madam Commissioner, for your contribution to this debate. After Madam Johansson on Monday, you are already the second Commissioner of the European Commission to participate in our debates, and we appreciate that very much. We now start with our debate in the hemicycle, and in that debate I call as our first speaker, on behalf of the group ADLE, Damien Cotier de la Suisse. Vous avez la parole, cher Damien.
Merci, cher Président, et permettez-moi d'en profiter pour vous féliciter pour votre élection, et je le fais en français, avec grand plaisir. Monsieur le Président, chers et chers collègues, on ne choisit pas d'appartenir à une minorité sexuelle, on est ainsi. En ce qui me concerne, je suis né ainsi, la nature m'a fait ainsi, Dieu m'a fait ainsi. Personnellement, j'ai longtemps lutté contre cette situation. J'avais de la peine à l'admettre quand j'étais jeune. Mais vous savez, la nature a été plus forte et j'ai fini par accepter cet état de situation et à bien le vivre. Et puis j'ai rencontré la personne avec qui je partage ma vie, l'homme de ma vie. Il se trouve que nous fêterons demain les 15 ans de notre relation. C'est le hasard qui veut cela. C'est la période la plus heureuse de ma vie parce qu'elle me permet de vivre en fond pleinement qui je suis. Et ce que je refusais est devenu une joie au quotidien. Et le fait d'en parler ouvertement me permet d'être libre. Et le fait de vivre dans un pays et sur un continent qui accepte cela me permet d'être l'égal des autres. Alors je ne suis pas là, Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs, pour vous parler de moi, mais je suis là pour vous parler de moi comme un de ces dizaines de millions de citoyens de ce continent qui vit avec cette situation, qui doit grandir avec cette situation, qui doit faire ce travail sur soi-même pour s'accepter. Et si la société l'aide, cette personne aide ces personnes à accepter cela, eh bien la situation est extrêmement différente que si la société refuse, rejette, met à l'écart. Et c'est donc là-dessus que nous devons travailler pour ces dizaines de millions de personnes. Et malheureusement, ça a été dit très clairement par les rapporteurs et par la commissaire européenne, eh bien, tout ne va pas bien partout en Europe actuellement, et de loin pas. On a même vu des régressions, là où il y avait eu des progressions pendant ces dernières années. Il y a des situations qui sont tout simplement inacceptables. Et donc ces rapports que nous avons aujourd'hui sont des rapports importants, je le dis au nom du groupe ALDE, et ils proposent des mesures concrètes, comme ça a été mentionné, qui sont extrêmement utiles et que nous devrons vraiment transmettre aux États membres de notre organisation et rappeler à tous les États, et à certains spécifiquement, qui mènent une politique qui n'est pas acceptable, comme certaines régions de Pologne, comme la Hongrie, comme certaines régions de Russie, et la zone du Caucase du Sud a aussi été mentionnée. Nous devons leur dire deux choses. Au fond, ce que les rapporteurs ont très bien dit, en faisant cela, vous luttez contre les droits de l'homme et donc contre la Convention européenne des droits de l'homme et les valeurs fondamentales de cette organisation auxquelles vous vous êtes vous-même astreint. Et puis la deuxième chose, c'est que c'est absurde. Ne luttez pas contre la nature. Ne luttez pas sur le monde tel que Dieu l'a fait. Essayez de vous engager pour votre société, pour une société constructive et heureuse, plutôt qu'en luttant contre cet état de nature, de diffuser le malheur. Ces rapports nous y aident et nous remercions les rapporteurs pour les propositions.
Merci, Monsieur Coutier. Next speaker on our list on behalf of the group of the Unified European Left is Thomas Pringle from Ireland. Thomas, you have the floor. Please put on your mic.
Good morning, Mr. President, and I would like to congratulate you on your election as well. Sorry. In our Parliament, we can take off our mask when we're speaking. Sorry. Hate crime against LGBTI people is on the rise right across Europe. It is at different levels of intensity and violence in every country, but wherever it arises, it is having a huge impact on very vulnerable groups in society, and if unchecked, will lead to attacks on wider marginalised groups as well. We as politicians have a responsibility to stand with LGBTI people across Europe now. We cannot wait for them to target other groups, but must shout stop. I agree totally with the views expressed by the author of the report we are discussing today, that it is the result of a sustained and often well-organised attacks on the human rights of LGBTI+ people throughout Europe that we are in this situation. In Ireland, we do not yet have specific legislation that details hate crime. Our Department of Justice is only now looking at implementing legislation, so even with the best will in the world, that will be a few years away from being enacted. The Gardaí, our local police, have introduced a working hate crime definition to try and quantify the extent of the problem, but unfortunately we have experienced problems with the veracity of the reporting by them of various crime figures, so the question is, can that be believed either? In order for us in Ireland to have legitimacy when challenging other members of the Council of Europe on the record, we need to improve our own. Currently, we have problems with TERFs, trans-exclusionary radical feminists groups, who attack the rights of trans people to use, for example, toilet facilities of women, supposedly on behalf of protecting the rights of women. This is mainly on social media at the moment, but will become more mainstream and plays into the irrational fears of citizens. It is a movement that is funded by radical right-wing religious groups from the USA that have been organising for some time in the UK and are getting a hold in Ireland as well. Allowing this unchecked on social media amounts to condoning hateful language and incitement, which is in violation of the European Convention of Human Rights. As the Commissioner for Human Rights highlighted in May 2021, decision makers have a responsibility to create and set the obligations that social media companies must meet, and the judiciary has a responsibility to enforce them as well. These groups have a wider political motivation, as I said in the report as well, with attacks on abortion, contraception, sexual education, same-sex marriage, gender and gender recognition, access to transition-related medical care, trans and intersex participation in sport, and ratification and implementation of the Istanbul Agenda, which by maintaining inequalities directly violates women's, children's and LGBTI+ people's human rights. It is clear, as the author says, that the recognition of LGBTI+ people's human rights does not harm society, women or children. On the contrary, it ensures a safe and welcoming society for everyone, and that should be our aim. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pringle. Next speaker on our list is Max Lux, who is from Germany and who speaks on behalf of the group of the Socialists, Democrats and Greens. Herr Lux, Sie haben das Wort.
Ja, sehr geehrter Herr Präsident, sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, auch von mir erstmal herzlichen Glückwunsch zu Ihrer Wahl und an meine Fraktionskollegen herzlichen Glückwunsch und herzlichen Dank für diese sehr guten Berichte. Ich fühle mich wirklich sehr geehrt dazu, direkt in der ersten meiner ersten Sitzung des Europarates für meine Fraktion sprechen zu dürfen, als Politiker, der sich für LGBTI-Rechte engagiert, aber auch als schwuler Europäer, der eben hier erlebt, wie sich diese parlamentarische Versammlung auch seiner Rechte annimmt. Für viele ist ja die Frage ziemlich unklar, wer eigentlich queere Personen sind, und viel schlimmer noch, für einige Staats- und Regierungschefs, auch im Europarat, sind wir eine Ideologie oder wir verursachen Krankheiten. Aber eigentlich ist die Frage, wer wir sind, wer queere Personen sind, ziemlich einfach. Wir sind Menschen. Menschen, die frei leben und frei lieben können wollen. Menschen mit Würde und mit Rechten. Und Menschen, die sich zu Recht wehren. Die sich wehren, wenn sie Angst haben müssen, auf der Straße Händchen zu halten. Die sich wehren, wenn Verfassungen schwulen Vätern oder lesbischen Müttern das Elternsein absprechen. Wehren, wenn Wasserwerfer Christopher Street Days von Festen der Liebe in Aufmärsche autoritärer Staatsgewalt verwandeln. Der Europarat als oberster Hüter der Menschenrechte ist deshalb gefragt, und darum ist es so wichtig, dass wir uns heute an die Seite von Lesben, Schwulen, Bisexuellen, Trans- und intersexuellen Personen stellen. Meine Fraktionskollegen haben dazu sehr gut identifiziert, was Handlungsfelder sind für die Mitgliedstaaten, aber auch für uns. Die Staaten des Europarates müssen insgesamt zum Schutz- und Freiheitsraum für LGBTI-Rechte werden. Das heißt, wir müssen wirklich in die nationale Gesetzgebung den Schutz vor Diskriminierung geben, uns schützen vor sexuelle und geschlechtliche Minderheiten stellen und gleichzeitig auch queer sein endlich als Fluchtgrund anerkennen und queere MenschenrechtsverteidigerInnen auf der Welt schützen. Das ist die Hoffnung für eine gute Zukunft der Freiheit, aber wir dürfen uns nichts vormachen. In dieser Gegenwart verzeichnen wir massive Rückschritte. Vieles von dem, was erkämpft wurde, ist auf dem Spiel. Aber gerade in dieser Zeit erleben wir, dass es notwendig ist, für die Rechte von LGBTI zu kämpfen, denn sie sind überall. Das zeigt erst gestern ein Beispiel aus Deutschland. Hier haben sich gestern 100 Mitarbeiterinnen und Mitarbeiter der katholischen Kirche, unter ihnen Pfarrer, geoutet als queer. Sie haben damit auf eine Ungerechtigkeit aufmerksam gemacht, die es hier gibt, im kirchlichen Arbeitsrecht zum Beispiel. Und sie haben gesagt, sie wollen das vermeintlich Unsichtbare überwinden. Sie wollen die unteilbaren Menschenrechte durchsetzen. Liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, machen auch heute wir etwas sichtbar. Setzen wir uns auch hier heute für Menschenrechte ein. Nehmen wir diese Berichte an.
Danke sehr, Herr Lux. Gratuliere mit Ihrem ersten Beitrag in unserer Versammlung. Next speaker on behalf of the group of the EPP is Mr. Dimitrios Karidas from Greece. You have the floor, Mr. Karidas.
Yes, good morning from a very snow-covered white Athens, unusually white Athens. I wish I were there with you, Mr. President, to congratulate you in person, but you have the congratulation of everybody and the best wishes for a good work ahead. Let me start with a very brief comment on the commissioner we just heard, Mrs. Elena Dalli. She comes from a country, Malta, a small Mediterranean, Southern European country, Catholic country, that ranks at the very top of every international league on the protection of LGBTI rights. And this is very important. Malta has sent a very powerful message all over the world and all over Europe, and its example should be imitated across Europe. Now, there is no doubt that there has been a lot of progress in protecting LGBTI rights recently, but this progress is undoubtedly uneven, it's not homogeneous, and there are huge differences among European countries. There has been a very worrying trend that is being evidenced in the first report. Certain governments, such as that in Turkey under President Erdogan, or Russia under President Putin, or even EU members such as Hungary and Poland, have targeted the LGBTI community for petty electoral political reasons. And this is totally unacceptable and goes contrary to our work here as the guardians of human rights all over Europe. Furthermore, there are problematic areas such as Southern Caucasus, whereas despite the progress in countries such as Georgia, I cannot but express my shame and horror in reading some of the stories included in the second report coming out of countries such as Azerbaijan. Absolute horror. We at the EPP are adamant about the protection of LGBTI rights. It is part of who we are and who we want to be as a free, open, liberal European society. It makes us all better and help us harness the full potential of all members of our societies. Discrimination is despicable, unproductive, one might say, but totally unacceptable and un-European, let me say. Let me congratulate the two rapporteurs for the excellent job they've done and assure you all that the EPP will stand by the rights of all European citizens and support this Assembly's commendable interest in LGBTI rights and their respect all over Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carias, for your contribution. And now the last speaker on behalf of the political groups is Madam Nicole Höchst. She speaks on behalf of the ECDA group and she is from Germany. Sie haben das Wort, Frau Höchst.
Thank you. Dear Mr. President, dear Rapporteur, dear Ms. Dalli, dear colleagues. To be perfectly clear, I condemn the violence that occurred on July 4th, 2021 in Georgia by groups protesting a Tiflis Pride event, just as I condemn all violence and support the rights of all people to live freely and to express themselves openly. And yet, I suspect that the discussion of this incident together with the report combating rising hate against the LGBTI people in Europe seeks to forge a connect between an unwillingness to accept the latest gender industry fad and violent oppression. If you don't want to give 14-year-olds puberty-blocking hormones or believe in the existence of two genders, you're supposedly calling forth the next homophobic mob. It's a tactic meant to shut down all dialogue and debate. Well, I disagree with you and I see through this trick. Complying with the suggestions in combating rising hate against LGBTI people in Europe will not prevent another Tiflis. The hateful violence will not stop when the Georgian word for women has been replaced by persons who have wombs. It might be better not to try, but to instead insist that the state guarantee the human rights of all its citizens and enforce the rule of law. The report combating rising hate against LGBTI people in Europe describes is divided into an oppressive heteronormative society and a free, open rainbow world. It therefore comes as no surprise that the narrative of backsliding and heteronormative hatred that supposedly characterizes Western society violence against LGBTI community rarely comes from within this tradition. In cities like Berlin and Cologne, groups of young men, as they are euphemistically called, are more generally to be blamed. The paper's author, Mr. Benfica, seems to be unaware of the Christian tradition he seeks to destroy. As a result, Polish and Hungarian efforts to maintain their identity are condemned. Even the United Kingdom is portrayed as an intolerant backwater because many journalists there report a growing unease with the policy of allowing transgender women to be housed in women's prisons, a policy that has resulted in rape and abuse in a population of already vulnerable people. Of course, this story is not consistent with the narrative that the LGBTI community shares the same interest as women. To sum it up, those two reports are beating around the bush. Deconstruction and the denying of reality is not helping anybody. They are furthering intolerance and insecurity for women and LGBTI. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Höchst. This concludes the speakers on behalf of the political groups. We now go to our other speakers, and first I call Madam Petra Bayer from Austria, and she's a member of the Socialists, Democrats and Greens group. You have the floor, Petra.
Ja, vielen lieben Dank, Tine. Ich kann natürlich auch nur damit beginnen, dir alles Gute zur Wahl zu wünschen. Ich freue mich sehr auf die Zusammenarbeit in den nächsten 2 Jahren. Alles Gute. Zu den Berichten. Furat Benčica spricht in seinem Bericht vollkommen zu Recht an, dass Hass gegen LGBTIQ-Personen schon lange nichts mehr zu tun hat mit individuellen Ausdruck von Hass. Es ist vielmehr ein immer mehr gut organisierter Hass gegen Personen, die einfach eine andere, nicht die Konstruktion von Familie, von Liebe hat wie die Mehrzahl der Gesellschaft, sondern ihre individuelle Liebe auslebt. Und die dafür mit Hass zu bestrafen, ist in der Tat sehr, sehr problematisch. Das äußert sich dann vor allem in Gewalt, geschlechtsspezifischer Gewalt, von der vor allem LGBTIQ-Personen und Frauen massiv betroffen sind gleichermaßen. Ich glaube, wir müssen doch wirklich Seite an Seite gegen diesen Hass kämpfen. Es ist nicht hinzunehmen, dass jetzt noch Gesetze und Verfassungen existieren, die LGBTIQ-Personen diskriminieren, aber es ist noch viel weniger hinzunehmen, dass auch neue Gesetze, neue Verfassungen geschrieben werden, die die Diskriminierung von LGBTIQ-Personen in sich tragen. Und darum ist es ganz besonders begrüßenswert, dass die Venedig-Kommission zu den Entwicklungen in Ungarn eine so klare Stellungnahme gegeben hat und wirklich sagt, das geht nicht. Es geht nicht, unter dem Schutzmantel Kinder zu schützen, vorzugeben, Kinder zu schützen, LGBTIQ-Personen zu diskriminieren und Kindern einen evidenzbasierten Zugang zu sexueller Bildung zu verwehren. Ja, besonders schlimm, und darauf weist Christophe Lacroix hin, ist die Situation in Armenien, Aserbaidschan und Georgien. Und trotzdem es auch in diesen Ländern natürlich Fortschritte gibt, ist es, finde ich, ganz besonders wertvoll in diesem Bericht, dass Christoph da sehr konkrete Vorschläge macht, wie die Situation verbessert werden kann, wie die Situation für Menschen verbessert werden kann, auch was ihre Sicherheit, nicht nur ihre Menschenrechte, auch ihre individuelle Sicherheit betrifft. Das ist sehr, sehr wichtig, weil was irgendwie klar sein muss, und das, glaube ich, auch unser Leitschirm sein muss, wir alle sind eine Wertegemeinschaft, und diese Wertegemeinschaft, festgeschrieben in der Europäischen Menschenrechtskonvention, umfasst natürlich auch die Werte des Rechts auf Privat- und auf Familienleben. Und diejenigen, die diese Werte angreifen, die diese Werte in Frage stellen, sollten sich selbst fragen, ob sie unter dem Schirm der Europäischen Konvention für Menschenrechte auch wirklich gut aufgehoben sind. Herzlichen Dank euch beiden für diese sehr wichtigen, wertvollen Berichte. Es war eine Freude, auch im Ausschuss gemeinsam daran zu arbeiten. Und unsere Arbeit wird nicht heute erledigt sein. Wir werden noch viel zu tun haben. Ich freue mich auch auf die Umsetzung und die weiteren Schritte. Herzlichen Dank.
Danke sehr, Frau Bayer. Now I call in the debate Madam Katalin Zöber from Hungary, and she's a member of the ECDA group. You have the floor, Madam Zöber.
Bonjour à tous. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Chers collègues, nous sommes certainement tous d'accord pour dire que la haine à l'encontre de tout être humain est inacceptable. Il convient de souligner que le cadre juridique de la protection contre la discrimination en Hongrie est complet et conforme à la législation européenne et aux exigences internationales. La loi fondamentale de la Hongrie interdit toute forme de discrimination, y compris la discrimination sur l'orientation sexuelle. Concernant la loi hongroise sur la protection de l'enfant, nous rejetons toute hypothèse selon laquelle la Hongrie pratiquerait une discrimination à l'encontre des personnes LGBTI. La loi ne dit rien de l'orientation sexuelle des personnes âgées de plus de 18 ans. Elle stipule seulement que la prise de décision sur l'éducation sexuelle des enfants est le seul droit des parents. Il est très important de souligner que les amendements individuels à la loi ne viennent pas à exclure ou discriminer. Ils se concernent uniquement sur l'éducation des enfants hongrois et la protection des mineurs. À cette fin, un certain nombre d'amendements ont été apportés à la législation sectorielle, mais strictement dans le cadre ou sur la base des normes juridiques internationales. La Charte européenne des droits de l'homme stipule également qu'un parent a le droit de déterminer l'orientation du développement de son enfant sur la base d'un contexte culturel et traditionnel spécifique. Même lors du débat sur l'avis de la Commission de Venise, un certain nombre de ses membres ont attiré l'attention sur le fait que ces rapports ne peuvent pas être biaisés sur la base de certaines opinions idéologiques et ils ne doivent donc examiner que la dimension juridique. Comme l'ont reconnu les rapporteurs eux-mêmes, chaque pays a le droit de déterminer sa propre base politique idéologique. En conséquence, les citoyens hongrois décideront s'ils souhaitent conserver ces changements juridiques par un référendum sur la protection de l'enfance cette année en mois d'avril. Merci.
Merci à vous, Madame Schöber. La prochaine oratrice sur notre liste est Madame Nicole Duraton de la France et membre du groupe ADLE. Vous avez la parole, chère Nicole.
Tout d'abord, toutes mes félicitations, Monsieur le Président, pour votre élection. Mes chers collègues, je tiens tout d'abord à remercier nos rapporteurs de porter à nouveau la question de la haine et de la violence à l'encontre des personnes LGBTI devant notre Assemblée. En effet, ce n'est pas la première fois que nous avons à traiter de cette question. Certes, on peut se féliciter des progrès accomplis ces dernières années en Europe pour favoriser l'inclusion des personnes LGBTI. Néanmoins, il ne faut pas oublier qu'en Europe, aujourd'hui, des personnes LGBTI sont toujours discriminées, agressées, voire assassinées en raison de leur orientation sexuelle. L'un des rapports qui nous est présenté aujourd'hui détaille particulièrement la situation dans les pays du Caucase du Sud, à savoir l'Arménie, l'Azerbaïdjan et la Géorgie. J'appelle ces pays tout d'abord à garantir la protection effective des personnes LGBTI face aux violences. Des enquêtes effectives devront être menées et des poursuites devront être diligentées dans les cas de violence. La sécurité est un droit pour tous, y compris pour les personnes LGBTI. Ensuite, les droits fondamentaux des personnes LGBTI doivent être respectés, notamment le droit de réunion et d'association. Enfin, les responsables politiques, et notamment les parlementaires, devraient s'abstenir de tenir des propos insultants ou discriminatoires à l'encontre de ces personnes. Si la Géorgie a adopté une législation sanctionnant les discriminations en raison de l'orientation sexuelle, l'Arménie et l'Azerbaïdjan ne l'ont pas fait pour le moment. J'appelle donc les autorités politiques de ces pays à le faire rapidement. Malheureusement, nous aurions tort de penser que les violences et les discriminations à l'encontre des personnes LGBTI sont limitées au Caucase du Sud. Par ailleurs, en Europe, on constate une recrudescence de la haine à l'encontre des personnes LGBTI. En Turquie, au moins 4 femmes transgenres ont été tuées en 2018. La situation est également particulièrement critique en Tchétchénie, avec des actes d'enlèvement, de détention arbitraire et de torture. La crise sanitaire et ses confinements à répétition n'ont rien arrangé. Les violences à huis clos, souvent dans le cadre familial contre les personnes LGBTI, ont nettement progressé. C'est le cas malheureusement aussi en France. L'action contre ces violences ne doit donc pas faiblir. Au sein de notre organisation, je me félicite que la Commission européenne contre le racisme et l'intolérance ait décidé de travailler sur cette question. De même, au sein de l'Union européenne, la Commission européenne a adopté en 2020 une stratégie en faveur de l'égalité de traitement à l'égard des personnes LGBTI pour la période 2020-2025. Mais sur ce sujet, nous devons également agir à l'échelle nationale. Notre rôle de parlementaire est de promouvoir une politique inclusive des personnes LGBTI et de nous assurer de la mise en œuvre effective d'une législation sanctionnant les propos haineux et les violences à l'encontre de ces personnes. Je vous remercie.
Merci à vous, Madame Duranton. Prochain orateur sur notre liste est Monsieur Leonid Slutsky de la Fédération de Russie. Vous avez la parole, Leonid.
Bonjour, Tine, félicitations avec vos élections hier. Bravo. Et je vais continuer en russe. Дорогие коллеги, мы обсуждаем сейчас вопрос, который не впервые дебатируется в нашей ассамблее. Наши коллеги Фурат Бенчих и Кристоф Лакура подготовили очередные доклады. Но мне кажется, что мы слишком пристальное внимание уделяем этой категории европейских граждан. В моей стране, о чем несколько лет назад бывший уже сегодня спикер Государственной Думы господин Сергей Нарышкин, выступая в ассамблее, подробно рассказал, не оказывается каких-либо препятствий, притеснения. Но мне кажется, что мы в ассамблее должны уделять большее внимание тем категориям, которые реальным образом притесняются. Например, так называемые неграждане в Эстонии и Латвии. Напомню, что термин «неграждане» противоречит нормам и принципам международного права. Вместе с тем, коль скоро мы обсуждаем данную проблематику, хочу сказать, что она является искусственной, и в подавляющем большинстве стран-членов Совета Европы у нас нет каких-то препятствий, наоборот, в последние годы именно эта категория европейских граждан получила, может быть, внимание к себе и свободы, которых никогда не было в человеческой истории. И по этому поводу я испытываю несколько странные эмоции. Думаю, что в нашей ассамблее мы должны заниматься более реальными проблемами. И думаю, что это определит место и роль Совета Европы и нашей ассамблеи в европейской архитектуре нового столетия, которая формируется именно сейчас, именно в эти годы. Мне крайне неприятно и непонятно, что ситуация в притеснении ЛГБТ-сообщества приписывается некоторым республикам Российского Северного Кавказа, в частности, Чеченской Республике. Я хочу заверить, что в этой республике нет представителей данных сексуальных меньшинств. Это определяется традициями кавказских народов. А глава Чеченской Республики Рамзан Кадыров, человек исключительно уважаемый в России, который сумел добиться мира и процветания для своей родной земли, это неоднократно обсуждалось в ассамблее, выступает за европейские стандарты, и об этом знают все, кто когда-либо посещал Чеченскую Республику, и думаю, что могут сделать это и сегодня. Спасибо.
Spasiba, господин Slutsky. Next speaker on our list is Mr. Domagoj Hajdukovic from Croatia, and he's a member of the Socialist Democrats and Greens group. You have the floor, Mr. Hajdukovic.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lots of greetings from Croatia. First of all, dear colleagues, I think we need to make something clear. What we are debating today in the hemicycle is not categories of citizens. We are talking about human beings and we are talking about human rights. I find it sad that in the 21st century, we have to have these debates, but unfortunately, they are necessary. And therefore, I congratulate the rapporteurs on their work and their reports, and I hope this is not the last time we debate this category of citizens. For this category of citizens, as some colleagues call us, are still prosecuted. And not only in the Caucasus region, but in the also countries that are members of the European Union. Let us not forget what is happening in Hungary. And although the law does not specifically stipulate the sexual orientation of a person, it is still discriminatory. Let us not forget Poland and LGBT-free zones, and which I would call human-free zones. Is that the next step? Because LGBTI people are human. first and foremost. And we are discussing somebody being discriminated or being exposed to violence simply because they love. And that's, my dear friends, what we are discussing today and why we need to have these discussions. There were talks about ideological stance of member countries. I think we all agree on one ideological stand, and those are human rights and standards stipulated in the Human Rights Charter. And I don't see anywhere in the Human Rights Charter stipulation that you are forbidden to love whom you love or whom you want to love. For some colleagues, even in my country, unfortunately, it is a bigger problem to have rainbow flags displayed than violence against LGBTI people, than violence against women. Unfortunately, these are not acceptable standards in the 21st century, at least in my opinion, and therefore a more proactive stand and more action is required. Not to promote gender ideology, as some would call it, not to promote ideological stands, but to promote the values this institution stands for: human rights, human beings, and right to love. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Hadjukovic. Now I call in the debate Madam Tamar Taliashvili from Georgia, and she's also a member of the Socialist Democrats and Greens group. You have the floor, Madam Taliashvili. You are muted. Madam Taliashvili, you are muted. That is far better.
Your Honor, Mr. President, dear colleagues, firstly, I will use this opportunity to congratulate you, Mr. President, on the occasion of the appointment, and I wish you all the success. Of course, I salute rapporteurs for their great work, and let me especially thank Mr. Christophe Lacroix for his effort and contribution to strengthen human rights and democratic developments in South Caucasus. In connection to Georgia, the draft resolution covers country's progress, highlighting the major reform as the law on the elimination of all forms of discrimination was passed, and subsequent reforms were conducted to combat and prevent gender minority discrimination. Further, legislation banning hate speech based on sexual orientation and gender identity has been adopted. Let me assure you that Georgia stays committed to its key priority of the protection of the fundamental human rights. Yes, the rights and not some categories, as we have just heard here. Any violation in this respect is being and will be duly condemned and investigated. At the end, let me emphasize that the Council's outstanding commitment in strengthening human rights and democratic institutions in Georgia is of an utmost value of our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Taliashvili. And now we are going to listen to the contribution of Mr. John Howell from the United Kingdom. And John is a member of the ECDA group. You have the floor, John.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I don't know where to begin with this report. This report is atrocious, and I do not congratulate the rapporteur. He presents opinions as if they were fact, and I have great difficulty with that, particularly in the relationship to the United Kingdom. So I shall not be voting for this report. I shall not be voting for this report because I am not anti-gay. I shall not be voting for this report because I am pro-gay, and I have spent a lot of my political career in the Middle East celebrating the enormous freedoms that LGBTI people have in Israel, where their rights are fully respected, and where, in contrast to elsewhere in the Middle East, they are not thrown off a tall building simply for being LGBTI people. I take an example from closer to home, which the author of the report did not look at, and that is the House of Commons in London. The House of Commons in London is one of the most gay places that we have in London. There are well over 45 members of Parliament who are gay. And what that says is not about the ability of the House of Commons in itself to accept people who are gay. It says a lot about the attitude of constituencies, of the people on the ground, to be able to look not at somebody's sexuality when they choose them as a candidate, but simply for their competencies. One gay member, who was a member of this group until very recently, is now a deputy speaker of the House of Commons, and many members are ministers. Of course, the law is very clear, and the implementation is very good, but it doesn't take away from some of the attitude of people on the ground. And today I saw that a gay couple had been prevented from buying a house from a couple who had said that they did not want to sell it to a gay couple. The important thing about that story is that the company that was trying to sell that house withdrew the house from the market and stopped them being able to take advantage of an LGBTI couple who were trying to buy it. That is the extent of the education that is taking place in the UK, and that is the extent of the freedoms that we have there for LGBTI to exist and to have the human rights that we all expect.
Thank you, Mr. Howell. Now, next in the debate, I call Madam Fiona O'Loughlin from Ireland, and she's a member of the ALDE group. You have the floor, Fiona.
Mr. President, and may I also add my voice of congratulations to your presidency, and I look forward to working with you. Contrary to the last speaker, I want to congratulate the rapporteurs of both of these opinions, Mr. Shika Farhat and Mr. Lacroix. I think they've done excellent work, and I think this is a debate we need to have today and we need to continue to have, because I believe that this debate goes to the very heart and soul of what the Council of Europe stands for, supporting respect, equality, and the right of every one of us to be who we are without fear of prejudice. As Oscar Wilde famously said, "Be yourself, everyone else is taken." And I think in Mr. Cottier's very eloquent contribution here, when he spoke about the fight against nature, this is exactly what he was referring to. I also thank the Commissioner for her words, and I think it's very noteworthy that the European Parliament has declared the entire EU an LGBTIQ freedom zone, and are also emphasising the importance of mutual tolerance within our communities. We must encourage all Member States to support stronger anti-hate and anti-discrimination legislation, and to really speak strongly against any incidences of homophobia and transphobia. In my own country, we were the first in the world to legalise same-sex marriage back in 2015, and we were very proud of that, but we have yet to enact hate crime legislation, which is essential, I believe, in the fight to battle discrimination, homophobia and transphobia. But work is well on the way to ensure that it will soon be on our statute books, and a bill was published in April of last year, which is now going through the Dáil to ensure that it will be in place. The rights of the LGBTIQ persons are human rights, and while Europe has a united in diversity motto, we are at the same time experiencing increased polarisation, and we're still witnessing conversion therapies and forced medical interventions. We, as legislators, must act to provide legislative frameworks for explicit naming of bias crime. Diversity should be a strength, but sadly, not everyone sees this the same way. Some people see it as a threat to their own identity, and they're willing to engage in violence to continue that exclusion. In a debate I initiated recently in the Irish Senate, the Father of the House, esteemed Senator David Norris, spoke about personally knowing 9 gay men that had been murdered. And I despair when I hear that. I despair when I see what has been happening in Georgia, in Armenia, in Azerbaijan. And I despair when I heard what our Russian speaker spoke about earlier. We cannot sit idly by while members of our societies are singled out for attack, stigmatised or dehumanised. And we must be uncompromising in our rejection of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam O'Loughlin. Next in our debate, I call Mr. Samsail Saraliev, and he is from the Russian Federation. You have the floor, Mr. Saraliev. Mr. Saraliev, you have to ask for the floor.
Слышно меня? Добрый день.
Добрый
день, уважаемый председатель, уважаемые коллеги. Присоединяюсь ко всем поздравлениям в связи вашего избрания на пост председателя. Здесь в документах, которые мы обсуждаем, выдвинуты достаточно серьезные обвинения в адрес России, в частности, в адрес Чеченской Республики. Речь идет о каких-то нарушениях прав человека и преследованиях людей. Не знаю, как в других странах, как действительно каждая ситуация, она индивидуальна, но что касается Чеченской Республики, хотел бы сказать следующее. После боевых действий в 90-х, 2000-х годах люди выезжали за границу, чтобы получить статус беженца и все привилегии, связанные с этим. На сегодняшний день война, боевые действия в Чеченской Республике закончились, поэтому некоторые люди, их мало, это единицы, нашли для себя новую лазейку в Европу. Они объявляют себя представителями ЛГБТ-сообщества и заявляют, что их преследуют, ущемляют их права. Все эти кейсы вот, по данной теме придуманы морально тяжелыми. То есть специально они готовятся, чтобы, подав эти документы для представителей Европейского Союза и показать всю тяжесть вот этой проблемы. Они на самом деле выдуманы, они искусственны. У нас есть также информация, что одна семья, которая уехала в Канаду, они согласились открыто говорить, что они представители ЛГБТ в обмен на определенную сумму денег и на постоянное место жительства. В связи с этим, конечно, идет вот такого рода атаки на Чеченскую Республику, что у нас притесняются такие люди. Так что все эти истории, о которых вы говорите и обвиняете в данном случае Чеченскую Республику, не имеют абсолютно никаких доказательств. Поэтому хотелось бы обратиться к докладчикам, чтобы все-таки они сами, увидев, сами посмотрев, изучив ситуацию на месте, делали выводы. А то, получается, они получают информацию от каких-то организаций и тем самым вводят людей в заблуждение. Вы пишете в своих резолюциях, основываясь на выдуманных фактах. Мы считаем, что эти факты выдуманы все-таки. Если вы действительно хотите разобраться и вам нужна правдивая информация, то добро пожаловать, приезжайте в Чеченскую Республику. Складывается впечатление, что столь высокая трибуна, как ПСР, становится инструментом давления на Россию, на Российскую Федерацию. А это недопустимо. Спасибо за внимание.
Spasiba, господин Saraliev. Prochain orateur dans notre débat, M. Per Lopez de l'Andorre. Il est membre du groupe de socialistes, démocrates et verts. Vous avez la parole, M. Lopez.
Gracias, señor presidente, y quiero aprovechar también en esta primera posibilidad de dirigirme a usted, como han hecho otros colegas, para felicitarle por su elección y desearle muchos éxitos en bien de esta noble institución. Seguidamente, quiero felicitar a los dos reporteros, los colegas Benchica y Lacroix, tomando las palabras que decía el señor Lacroix, casi más que colegas, amigos y personas que merecen mi más alta consideración y respeto. Y quiero felicitar sus profundos y detallados análisis que han realizado, los que voy a dar soporte, evidentemente, y sobre todo por mostrarnos la verdadera situación de los derechos LGTBI en muchas zonas del mundo y por mostrarnos lo muchísimo que falta aún por avanzar. Es cierto, se ha avanzado, ha habido avances, solo faltaría que no hubiera habido avances, pero no podemos menostener y olvidar las preocupantes señales de alerta y los muchos retrocesos que en paralelo a estos avances también se están produciendo. Y señales de alerta y retrocesos que se producen no solo en regiones del mundo donde esos derechos avanzan muy lentamente o, por decir las cosas como son, prácticamente no avanzan, sino que también señales de alerta y retrocesos que se producen en espacios como, por ejemplo, el de la Unión Europea. Y en ese sentido quiero también saludar, como ha hecho la compañera Petra Weiss, el contundente informe de la Comisión de Venecia respecto a los cambios legislativos que ha habido en Hungría. Y uno nunca deja de sorprenderse de algunas intervenciones como las que hemos podido oír de nuestro colega de la Federación Rusa, por mucho que va pasando el tiempo y se supone que estamos avanzando en esta materia. Y de golpe, incluso en Estados miembros de la Unión Europea, surgen partidos, surgen declaraciones que de un día para el otro vuelven a poner encima de la mesa debates que todos considerábamos ya superados. Creo que es necesario, como apuntaba la comisaria europea, el refuerzo legislativo contra toda muestra de odio. Tiene que haber una tolerancia cero con cualquier muestra de odio y esto tiene necesariamente que quedar reflejado en los códigos penales. Y ya para concluir, y también celebrando que se recojan los informes, hacer referencia a los colectivos trans y queer, tantas veces olvidados, que muy pocas legislaciones recogen y que, como hemos podido también comprobar en algunas intervenciones, hay absolutamente demasiado desconocimiento sobre su situación y sobre su sufrimiento. Gracias por vuestros reportes.
Muchas gracias, señor López. Now, next in the debate, I'll call Mr. Anton Gomez Reino from Spain, and he is a member of the UEL group. Dear Anton, you have the floor.
Bonjour. Good morning, dear colleagues. Primero de todo, también felicitar a Tini, al presidente. Creo que aborda un momento político decisivo en lo que tiene que ver con los derechos y con lo que significa la acción legislativa y política de esta Cámara y mandar todo el apoyo. Dicho esto, vamos a los informes en un momento donde los derechos LGTBI, de igual forma que los derechos de las mujeres, están afortunadamente en un claro avance social. Estamos viendo en especial desde hace pocos años y desde la erupción de fuerzas ultraconservadoras que cuestionan los valores democráticos y los derechos humanos fundamentales, un intento de contraofensiva contra los derechos de las personas que aman, que sienten y que se sienten diversas al marco patriarcal y heteropatriarcal. Ante esta ofensiva de odio hay que ser, creo que, cortantes y firmes todos y todas las demócratas y, por supuesto, todas las instituciones democráticas que se acogen a los tratados que dan sentido a este Consejo de Europa. Creo que hay que agradecer profundamente y apoyar la calidad y el valor de ambos informes, tanto el del camarada Benchica como el del señor Lacroix. Creo asimismo que desde esta tribuna hay que agradecer el trabajo que desde la sociedad civil están haciendo los propios colectivos LGTBI para reivindicar derechos y libertades que deberían de estar ya absolutamente garantizadas por los Estados, pero que tanto en el marco de la Unión Europea como en el marco del conjunto del continente están siendo atacados por constantes, peligrosos e intolerables discursos de odio que pretenden subvertir los derechos de millones de ciudadanos. Quiero hacer especial hincapié aquí a los enormes avances que se están dando desde mi país, desde el Estado español, conjunto del gobierno encabezado por el Ministerio de Igualdad, se están dando enormes pasos para la aprobación de medidas que allanan el camino hacia la igualdad sexual y de género, particularmente con la propuesta del proyecto de ley para la igualdad real y efectiva de las personas trans y para la garantía de derechos de las personas LGTBI. En ese sentido, y por otra parte, creo que en el ámbito europeo, en el ámbito continental, tenemos que expresar con toda firmeza que lo que está sucediendo en países donde el proceso de derechos está amparado cuando no alimentado por gobiernos ultraconservadores es absolutamente inaceptable, y decirle con claridad a estos gobiernos que sus sociedades no se merecen su mal gobierno y que la comunidad internacional no va a permitir sus ataques a los derechos humanos y a la democracia. Es evidente que aquellos que enarbolan la bandera del odio serán derrotados democráticamente, pero tenemos que trabajar con ahínco para que en su derrota no continúen arruinando dolorosamente vidas de personas LGTBI. Nuestra tarea como legisladores y legisladoras es la de garantizar derechos, garantizar protección, garantizar libertades a todos los ciudadanos y también a las personas LGTBI, queer y trans en todos y cada uno de los países de este Consejo de Europa. De eso es de lo que tratan estos informes y evidentemente hay que trabajar para que algunos discursos que hemos escuchado hoy queden atrás y sobre todo estos discursos de odio que están en la sociedad, en los medios y en los medios políticos queden fuera del marco democrático. Muchas gracias y bonjour, good morning, buenos días.
Muchas gracias, señor Gómez Reino. Now I call in the debate Madam Nigar Apardaray from Azerbaijan, and she's a member of the ECDA group. You have the floor, madam.
Dear colleagues, I would like to express my gratitude to the rapporteurs for this report, especially Mr. Lacroix, because I can only imagine how difficult it is to engage politicians and senior government representatives of South Caucasus in a meaningful discussion on the LGBTIQ issues. I agree with one of the core statements of the resolution that cultural and religious traditions cannot be used to justify discrimination on sexual identity grounds. But we all must admit that cultural and religious traditions are reality to reckon with, and any practical plan to advance human rights in this regard should be based on assessment and understanding of these realities. I also believe that there is no way to exclude the discussion on LGBTIQ issue from the general human rights discussion. And however difficult it is to have it in patriarchal and traditional societies like societies of South Caucasus, it's unavoidable and necessary. There are a couple of issues that I would like to make. I fully appreciate and understand that because of a number of cultural taboos in the countries of South Caucasus, collection of fair and transparent information on topics on sexual minorities is not easy. There are contradicting reports. Bureaucrats are sometimes reluctant to do proper disclosures because of various concerns over public opinions, political and religious exploitation of the issue, and so on. I understand it and I appreciate it. I'm quite sure that it was not easy to have a full picture. I also regret that Mr. Lacroix didn't have a chance to visit Azerbaijan for this report for no fault of his own. From this point of view, the rapporteur's job is commendable. At the same time, I would like to stress the certain difference in approaches with which parts of the report covering 3 countries have been written. What I've noted is that the part of the report covering a situation in Armenia and Georgia is very much devoted to the promises and explanations of public officials, and it's mostly about willingness of governments to change things for the better. The rapporteur did not have a chance to get similar promises in Azerbaijan, but I'm sure if he traveled there, he would get very similar promises. After all, 3 countries are quite similar in this respect. In case of Azerbaijan, it's very much based on various claims by local NGOs and activists. My overall feeling, sort of educated guess, is that there is a slow evolutionary improvement in the way society perceives LGBTIQ issues. There is much more empathy and less hate in the last years, a generational change. To the best of my understanding, the situation in all three countries is basically similar, and it's definitely not good. We have to confess this, and we have to try to change the situation on the ground. Not only promises from politicians, not only changes in legislation, but changes on the ground, and which comes in parallel to changes the mentality of people. Because our goal is to make lives of people safer and happier, regardless of who they believe they are. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now I introduce the next speaker is Krzysztof Smitzek, representing the Socialists, Democrats and Green, and from Poland. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President. As the chairman of the first ever LGBTI intergroup in the history of the parliament in Poland, but also as a lawyer and long-term activist dealing with combating discrimination for years, but also as an openly gay politician, firstly, I would like to thank Mr. Furat-Benchika and Mr. Lacroix for their excellent work and their reports and in-depth analysis. Despite all great achievements of the human rights movement in Europe, despite all efforts invested in the idea of equality for all by the institutions of the Council of Europe, yes, we still have to talk about discrimination. Yes, we still have to talk about homophobia. Yes, we still have to talk about hate and exclusion, which is experienced by many LGBTI Europeans on the daily basis. Homophobia, transphobia, sexism, and other forms of discrimination are clearly forbidden under the provisions of the European Convention of Human Rights. But the reality in Europe, in the countries of the Council of Europe, still differs significantly from what the law says. Homophobia and hate speech are often used as political tools. There are some countries in the Council of Europe group that took homophobia and took discrimination on the governmental agendas. Poland and Hungary are examples of Council of Europe countries where governments openly attack LGBTI people. I have to speak loudly and uncompromisingly about what is happening in my country today, in Poland. It is not enough to say that homophobia in Poland is a problem of structural oppression. For the last 7 years, homophobia and hatred in Poland have been a problem of the state oppression. The ruling party escalates violence and prejudices against LGBTI community. The hateful statements of top officials, brutal repressions against activists, degrading and cruel materials spread by public television. These are only a few examples how the state persecutes LGBTI minority in my country. Another shocking examples of institutional oppressions are LGBT-free zones enacted by many local governments. The only purpose of them is to harass us for who we love. The law and justice strategy is consistent: to take away our dignity, to take away our sense of security, to take away our visibility. The goal is simple: to make Poland one big LGBT-free zone. The Council of Europe should be one big freedom zone, equality zone, and territory of dignity for all. This is our fundamental duty as parliamentarians to do so. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Smitzek. And the next speaker I'd like to introduce is Mrs. Tonia Antoniassi, representing the Socialist Group from United Kingdom. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to wish everybody a Dydd Santis Dinwen Hapus, as today is the day of the Welsh patron saint of love, and to say that love is love, whoever you are and wherever you are in the world, is very, very important. I would also like to thank Mr. Benchika for his report and my Labour Party colleagues who have supported Amendments 7 to 16. Since these amendments were laid, I've received complaints about wanting to remove the UK from the list of countries with transphobia problems, but that was not what the paragraph we wanted to amend said. We need transparency in the production of very important reports which address the grave issue of combating rising hate against LGBTI people in Europe. I hope to amend the resolution to reflect the reality of the situation. And these amendments in no way attack any of our LGBTI friends. So let's have a debate. In Amendment 7, we wish to remove the words "and the United Kingdom" because while there is data that reflects an increase in reported hate against LGBTI people in the UK, this report draws upon data from the ILGA Europe review, and as cited really well by Monsieur Christophe Lacroix when he presented the other draft resolution. This review links the data source Rainbow Europe, and in the rank order of 49 European countries, the UK was placed 5th in respect of hate crimes and hate speech. I want to underline that. It was 5th. So while we can always do better, it is deeply concerning that the appalling treatment of LGBTI people in Russia, Hungary, Poland and Turkey is being compared to the situation in the UK. We must not conflate these situations in those countries with the UK. Vulnerable LGBTI people deserve better than that. There is an ongoing debate in the UK over sex and gender, and the resolution should rightly recognise that. We cannot compromise the protected characteristic of sex. Hence Amendments 10, 11, 12, 13 and 15 were laid. We must also respect single-sex spaces, hence Amendment 14. It is not hate to debate rights. We must debate them to get them right for everybody. As politicians, we have a responsibility to find a way through, ask those difficult questions, debate and discuss the consequences which are intended or unintended of potential legislation. In particular, why is sex absent from the list of protected characteristics? We must listen to women as well as the LGBTI people that we represent and come to a consensus. Only then can we feel confident that we might restore mutual respect and understanding. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Anna Antoniazzi. And the next speaker I'd like to introduce is Lord David Blenchatra, representing United Kingdom and representing the European Conservatives. The floor is yours, Lord.
Good morning, Madam President. In my years serving in this Honourable Assembly, I can say that the report by Mr. Benfica is unique. Unique because I've never before seen such a biased, distorted, utterly wrong work of fiction than his comments about the United Kingdom. If it goes unamended, then it will bring this Assembly into disrepute. The United Kingdom may not have been amongst the first to decriminalise homosexual acts and permit gay marriage, but we were decades ahead of some other countries in Europe, where 15 members of this Assembly still ban same-sex marriage. So we don't need any lectures on how to protect gay rights. Not a single political party or movement in the UK suggests retreating on gay rights. Not one single news outlet, religious or political figure has suggested that, nor withdrawing the existing legal protections for trans people. Our Gender Recognition Act protects trans people and gives them equal protection under the law, unlike the other countries mentioned. What the motion appears to be suggesting is that UK society suffers from bigotry by allowing an open discussion about introducing new laws about self-identification of gender. Now, that's a legitimate discussion that needs to be had, since growing numbers of women and LGBT people argue that, in fact, self-ID undermines their protections under the law. As J.K. Rowling, the famous authoress, has pointed out, quote, erase sex and you erase same-sex attraction. We do have a small militant group of extremist trans activists who will tolerate no discussion as they seek to impose their ideology, an ideology not supported by the vast majority of trans people. Thus, Maya Forstater, a tax lawyer, was sacked for tweeting, quote, woman means adult human female, unquote. Kathleen Stock, A professor of philosophy and herself a lesbian was hounded out of her job for supporting the rights of lesbians, bisexual and gay men as recognized by biological sex. And J.K. Rowling was vilified for criticizing the denigration of women as, quote, people who menstruate, unquote. It is not trans people who are under attack in the UK, it is women, as some militant activists seek to hijack the word woman for themselves and describe biological women as merely, quote, bodies with vaginas, unquote. That is a despicable way to vilify and dehumanize women. And some extremists go further. The BBC reported that some young lesbian women are being pressurized by men identifying as women to have penetrative sex with them, since they claim that they are now lesbians as well. Madam President, I want all trans women to be safe, but I also want natal women and girls to be safe also. I'm afraid the rapporteur has naively swallowed the propaganda of a small minority of trans activists. That does a disservice to all lesbian and gay people and to all those trans people who want to live in their chosen agenda in peace and harmony with those of a different biological sex. That's why this part of his report relating to the United Kingdom is not fit for purpose.
Thank you, Lord Benchatra. And the next speaker is Mrs. Sonia Gassarian from Armenia, representing the ALDE group. The floor is yours. It's online, I think. She doesn't seem to be connected, so then I continue with the next speaker is Mrs. Margaret de Boer from the Netherlands and representing the Socialist group. The floor is yours, Mrs. Boer.
Thank you. Violence against and discrimination of LGBTI people does not only happen in Russia, Hungary, Poland, or the countries of the Southern Caucasus. It happens in all our countries. Research of the Fundamental Rights Agency shows that in my own country, the Netherlands, 1 in 10 gay, lesbian, or trans persons has been physically attacked, while 1 in 5 trans persons experienced physical or sexual violence. 36% of the LGBTI elderly experience discrimination by caretakers, and 21% of LGBTI persons lost contact with 1 or more family members because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. These are serious figures. In his excellent report, Fouad Benchika explains very well the role that anti-gender rhetoric and hate speech play, and the way it's used in public debate and in politics. And I must say, we heard some of the examples today as well. And also, this is not only the case in countries like Russia, Hungary, and Poland, or the Southern Caucasus, on which Christophe Lacroix informed us in this also excellent report. Also in Western Europe, there's a lot of resistance against an inclusive approach to gender and gender identity. Even women who call themselves feminists are discriminating against trans women. Fighting for the rights of women or being proud of tolerance towards gays and lesbians is not enough. Our fight for human rights and against discrimination has to include everyone, including persons whose gender identity is not the same as the sex they were born in. We have a lot to do, and the reports we discussed today give us a clear guideline on where to start. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Boer. The next speaker is Mrs. Maria Fernandez from Spain, representing the Socialist group. The floor is yours.
Buenos días a todos y a todas desde España, queridos colegas. Mi enhorabuena en primer lugar al señor presidente por su elección. Y en esta, mi primera intervención en esta asamblea parlamentaria, deseo manifestar, con el debido respeto al trabajo realizado por los dos ponentes, el desacuerdo con el contenido del informe del señor Benchica en lo que respecta a las referencias a España, porque entiendo que estas no dan una referencia exacta de lo trabajado en esta materia en mi país, pudiendo ser consideradas absolutamente desfasadas. Me refiero concretamente a la mención de las declaraciones de la exvicepresidenta del Gobierno español, la señora Carmen Calvo, que sin duda alguna, a mi entender, han sido sacadas de contexto. Se trata de unas declaraciones que son publicadas durante el proceso de elaboración de la ley aprobada por el Gobierno en el marco de las negociaciones habidas en el seno del Gobierno de coalición de España. Miren, en 2005, con el presidente socialista Zapatero, España se situó a la vanguardia de los derechos LGTBI, convirtiéndose en el tercer país del mundo en legislar el matrimonio igualitario y en el primero en establecer la igualdad total en lo relativo a la adopción entre parejas del mismo sexo. También fue ese gobierno socialista quien en 2007 impulsó la ley reguladora de la rectificación registral de la mención relativa al sexo de las personas, que supuso también un avance internacional sin precedentes para los derechos de las personas trans. El actual Gobierno de España continúa avanzando en la garantía de derechos de este colectivo y en la promoción de la igualdad de las personas trans. Ese compromiso del Gobierno español se materializa con la aprobación por el Consejo de Ministros el 29 de junio de 2021 del anteproyecto de ley para la igualdad real y efectiva de las personas trans y para la garantía de los derechos de las personas LGTBI, que comprende una serie de políticas públicas que garantizarán los derechos del colectivo LGTBI de las personas trans. Es una legislación que supone un salto cualitativo en el desarrollo del proyecto vital de las personas LGTBI en mi país. Está en línea con los objetivos y medios definidos en la estrategia del LGTBI de la Unión Europea, situando una vez más a España a la vanguardia de esta materia, convirtiéndose con ello en el 16º país del mundo que permite la libre determinación de género. Es una ley absolutamente garantista que avanza en derechos con las suficientes garantías para que estos no puedan ser revertidos. Queda, pues, sin duda alguna patente y firme el compromiso del Gobierno de España con la defensa de los derechos del colectivo LGTBI de la mano de la sociedad civil y la necesidad, por supuesto, de condenar cualquier discurso de odio o de ataque a dicho colectivo. El Ejecutivo español, consciente de que aún queda mucho camino por recorrer, gobierna para ampliar derechos a la ciudadanía española, para mejorar su vida y crecer como país, trabajando por una sociedad tolerante en la que cabemos todos, con más garantías, con más igualdad y con más libertad. Muchas gracias y un saludo desde España.
Thank you for the greetings and thank you, Mrs. Fernandez. The next speaker is Mrs. Yevgenia Kravchuk from Ukraine and representing the ALDE. The floor is yours.
Thank you, dear colleagues, Madam President. First of all, I would like to extend my gratitude to both of the rapporteurs with whom I work at the same committee for their reports on the very acute issues. And as they correctly mentioned, the country's cultural and religious traditions cannot be used to justify discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity. So it is a pity to hear about the alleged violations of rights of LGBTI people, especially of times of greater vulnerability associated with the COVID pandemic. States should recognize that LGBTI people are among those particularly vulnerable in this crisis and take targeted steps to ensure that they are taken into consideration and their voices heard when addressing the pandemic. And of course, I cannot mention the situation in Chechnya, the Northern Caucasus region of Russian Federation. I would like to remind that this assembly voted for the resolution in 2018 about the situation with LGBTI in Chechnya. And I was really surprised by the speeches of our Russian colleagues who maybe are not well informed. And their position is that there are no LGBTI people in Chechnya, and we all know that is not true, or that LGBTI people make up stories to leave Russian Federation, Chechnya, to move to European Union or to move to Canada. But in fact, over 100 people have been detained for arbitrary reasons in unofficial prisons, where victims are being tortured by electric current, cruelly beaten, and forced to disclose personal contacts of other gay men in Chechnya. The Russian LGBT network can confirm at least 3 murders so far out of 20 reported murders. According to the recent journalist assessment specialized in Chechnya Administrative Unit, the violations with human rights, including rights of LGBTI, has deteriorated in 2021. Detained brothers Magomadov and Isayev reported numerous violations of their rights. And their request is to move them and to move the court hearings of their case to another geographical region of Russia from Chechnya. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Kravchuk. And now I give the floor to Mrs. Mariana Bardini from Ukraine and representing the ALDE group. The floor is yours. I think it's on now.
Dear Madam President, dear colleagues, first of all, I want to thank you, rapporteurs, for their excellent reports and paying attention to such important issue. The prepared report focused on a critical issue, the rising anti-gender rhetoric in Europe. Moreover, the anti-gender movement also is one of the key reasons the Istanbul Convention remains unratified in many countries, unfortunately. For example, in 2011, when the convention first opened for signatures, there was nothing controversial about expanding international law to protect women and girls from violence. Shortly afterwards, human rights defenders all over Europe began to experience a backlash from so-called conservatives over the convention. Gender is defined in Article 3 of the Istanbul Convention.
Mrs. Bardina, is it you have a competition, I think, behind you to also they want to take the floor because it's a lot of noise, and I do think that we sometimes hear more the others having speeches in the background. Can you move to another place?
Yes,
where it's quiet?
I will try.
Yeah, you can try, and then we wait because
Is it better? Is it better now?
Yes, much better. So then you can.
I'm very sorry, and I will continue. So yes. So gender is defined in Article 3 of the Istanbul Convention as the socially constructed rules, behaviors, activities, and attributes that a given society considers appropriate for women and men. That is a crystal clear and easy to understand definition. On the other hand, as the rapporteurs have noted, supporters of the anti-gender movement consolidate myths, stereotypes, and biases against human rights, as well as against the prevention of domestic and gender-based violence. Unfortunately, anti-gender ideas are widespread in social and traditional media, and high-level politicians use them to consolidate their electorate using people's fears and ignorance. They often frame it as a movement against international organizations and foreign elites seeking to undermine the family, the nation, or the church. I observe that in this regard, the anti-gender movement bears a stark resemblance to the anti-vaccine movement, thus becoming a threat to global security. Today, the ratification of the Istanbul Convention is one of the top priorities for us, for Ukrainian authorities, the President, and the Parliament alike. Therefore, we need to combine our efforts to eliminate harmful stereotypes and misunderstanding around this international document. So to do that, we need to strengthen educational policies so that more and more people learn about human rights and the younger generations develop respect for diversity and inclusivity. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Bardina. The next and last speaker is Madame Beatrice Fresco-Rolfo from Monaco, representing the ALDE group, and she's present in the plenary. The floor is yours.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je souhaite remercier les rapporteurs pour ces excellents rapports réalisés au nom de la Commission Égalité et Non-Discrimination, mais surtout pour leur énergie et leur engagement en faveur de la défense des droits humains, notamment celui de la liberté de choix de son orientation sexuelle. Si nombre de pays semblent être plus progressistes en ce qui concerne l'acceptation de cette différence, D'autres font l'objet d'un retour en arrière, ce qui est extrêmement regrettable, et vous l'avez tous deux souligné. J'ai l'impression que nous revivons dans ces pays cette période très spéciale où faire son coming out pouvait non seulement exclure la personne LGBTI de la société, mais pouvait aussi mettre sa vie en péril. Rappelons-nous les oppressions justifiées par une moralité publique décidée par certains et qui engageait une société dans son ensemble. Fermeture de clubs, emprisonnement, coups et blessures. Nous pourrions penser qu'il s'agirait de faits historiques, mais ce n'est malheureusement pas le cas. Au contraire, de nos jours, discours haineux et tentatives d'intimidation sont légion, le plus souvent cautionnés par les dirigeants, par nos dirigeants. Dernièrement, la Commission de Venise a été amenée à rappeler que, je cite, « l'homosexualité en tant que variante sexuelle est protégée par la Convention européenne des droits de l'homme et ne peut être considérée comme contraire aux bonnes mœurs par les pouvoirs publics. » Mais les avancées semblent être au point mort. Notre rôle et notre devoir en tant que parlementaires n'est-il pas de condamner ces attaques en adoptant ces deux résolutions? Monsieur Lacroix, j'ai bien saisi votre appel à l'information, à l'éducation, à l'insertion et à la formation, lesquels sont des moyens pour changer ces mentalités rétrogrades et nuisibles. Quant à vous, Monsieur Benchika, vous avez utilisé un verbe d'une grande violence, verbe que vous avez utilisé à raison et avec sens. Ce verbe, c'est déshumaniser les personnes LGBTI. Je ne puis concevoir qu'à notre époque, qu'après toutes ces années de travail au sein de cette Assemblée, sur toutes les questions ayant trait aux droits humains, nous puissions tolérer que certains de nos pays membres puissent encore aller à l'encontre du simple respect de l'humain. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so much. And that concludes the list of speakers and speeches of members on the speakers list who have been physically or remotely present during the debate. I see we have some colleagues that was not connected but have not been able to speak, maybe given the table office. Is it so? Oh, it's one colleague asking for the floor, but I just want to complete that publications in the official report. I remind colleagues that type text can be submitted no later than 4 hours after the list of speakers is interrupted. But I see a colleague in the plenary that wants to take the floor. Is that right? Can you present yourself?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. My name is Raivo Tamm, and I have an objection just for protocol. I'm just coming from Estonia, and I can confirm that there is nothing wrong with any right of any people in Estonia. As Mrs. Kravchuk said, there is some member of our assembly who is very wrongly informed. Thank you.
Thank you, that's noticed. Thank you so much. But the speakers list is concluded, and I call Mr. Benchika, the rapporteur, to reply to the debate. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, dear colleagues, for your intervention. Thank you for this vivid debate. Maybe some points as a response to Mr. Howell, who is apparently not among us anymore. You can say that even in states where huge progress towards LGBTI plus equality has been achieved, there are still many who suffer discrimination and violence. This is unfortunately the case if trans people in the UK today. However hard they may be for some to understand. Just to be clear about the UK, the Rainbow Map documents laws and policy only is not experienced. The annual review tracks the lived experience of LGBTI people, and the 2021 annual review clearly notes that increase in hate crime and hate speech against LGBTI people include, especially for trans people. And then maybe a last note, every citizen has a right to self-determination, and that must come first. We should be able to love who we want, to raise a family, and to be protected against all forms of discrimination. Our fight today is to protect the future generation from these injustices. This is about human rights and dignity, not about a so-called ideology. And I just want to take the last moment to address to all those members of the LGBTI plus community who are listening to this debate. You're not standing alone. Who you are is valid. Who you love is valid. Do not ever give up on yourself. You can count on us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Benchika, and then I call Mr. Lacroix, the rapporteur, to reply to the debate. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Présidente, moi je trouvais que le débat va très bien démarrer avec l'intervention pleine d'émotion du collègue Damien Cottier. Et puis est arrivée Madame Höchst, Frau Höchst, qui a condamné la violence, dit-elle, mais qui a tenu des propos d'une violence inouïe à travers l'écran. Mais, Madame Höchst, si je lis la presse allemande, Rhein Zeitung, in Wahlkampf sagte sie, c'est vous, vor einer Schülergruppe, dass sie die Ehe für alle ablehnt, viel unter homosexuellen Männern mehr pédophiles. Donc, vous avez tenu des propos homophobes et vous vous en prenez aux gays dans votre pays. Pourtant, il ne peut en aucun cas être prouvé scientifiquement qu'il y a un lien entre les pédophiles et les homosexuels. Donc, vos arguments sont d'une violence inouïe et intolérable, mais qu'attendre de l'extrême droite. Par contre, je voudrais saluer celles et ceux, en particulier Tamar Taliashvili et également Nijar Arpadaray, pour leurs commentaires positifs, en reconnaissant qu'il y avait encore des choses à faire chez eux. J'ai bien noté que j'étais invité en Azerbaïdjan, dès que je peux, j'irai, mais qu'il y avait des progrès qui étaient en cours et que les traditions familiales, les traditions religieuses ne devaient pas remettre ces progrès en cours et que donc il fallait travailler dans le sens du rapport. Et je trouve que par rapport à d'autres nations qui ont été épinglées dans le rapport de mon collègue, l'Arménie, l'Azerbaïdjan et la Géorgie ont fait preuve de beaucoup plus d'humilité, me semble-t-il, et ont reconnu qu'il y avait des choses qui ne se passaient pas très bien toujours chez eux, et je voudrais donc les remercier pour cela. Rappeler que nous sommes en 2022, qu'en 1982, puisque nous sommes à Strasbourg et en France, Robert Badinter, garde des Sceaux, ministre de la Justice en France, a fait en sorte de faire que l'homosexualité ne soit plus un délit en France. Donc, l'homosexualité en France jusqu'en 1982 était considérée comme un délit. Et enfin, je terminerai, puisque notre collègue nous a lu un extrait de Tennessee Williams, je vous lirai brièvement un extrait de James Baldwin. La vie est tragique, tout simplement parce que la Terre tourne, parce que le soleil se lève et se couche inexorablement, et parce qu'un jour, pour chacun de nous, le soleil se couchera pour la toute dernière fois. L'origine de toutes les difficultés humaines se trouve peut-être dans notre propension à sacrifier la beauté de nos vies, à nous emprisonner dans des totems, dans des tabous, des croix, des sacrifices de sang, des clochers, des mosquées, des races, des armées, des drapeaux, des nations, afin de dénier que la mort existe, ce qui est précisément notre unique certitude. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Mr. Lacroix. Does the chairperson of the committee wish to speak? Annika Engblom, Sweden, and the moderate.
Thank you, Madam President and dear colleagues. Europe is often seen as a world leader in promoting the equality of LGBTI people, but it is something of which we can be proud. But this also makes the two reports that we have just debated very difficult reading. As the reports and today's debate show, the great strides towards equality that have been achieved in many countries over recent decades are now facing backlash, backsliding, and stagnation. LGBTI-phobic discourse is on the rise throughout our continent, and it is also often spread by political and religious leaders. Many LGBTI people in Europe still face discrimination, harassment, physical threats in their daily lives. On behalf of the Committee of Equality and Non-Discrimination, I wish to thank our rapporteurs, Monsieur Fouad Benchika and Monsieur Christophe Lacroix, for examining these issues so carefully, for having the courage to tell uncomfortable truths, and for proposing a clear and constructive path forward to achieving equality for LGBTI people throughout Europe. I also wish to thank most warmly the European Commission for Equality, Helena Dalli, for the excellent work she's doing within the European Union in this field and for her deeply inspiring words today. Dear friends, this year marks 50 years since the great European city, London, held its first Pride rally. Let us use this anniversary to strengthen our efforts and achieve full equality for LGBTI people across Europe, and to ensure that our societies are truly welcoming to everyone, whatever their sexual orientation, gender identity, or sex characteristics. Once again, I congratulate our rapporteurs for their excellent reports, and I invite you, dear colleagues, not only to support them today, but to go on and use them to inspire your work in your own national parliaments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairpersons of the committee, Annika Engblom, and the debate is closed. Now we are going to consideration of amendments in document 15425 and the draft resolution. And the Committee on Equality and Non-Discrimination has presented a draft resolution, and you find it, as I mentioned, in the document, to which 15 amendments have been tabled. There is also a recommendation to which 1 amendment has been tabled. And I now go through the unanimous approval of amendments. And I understand that the chairperson of the Committee on Equality and Non-Discrimination wishes to propose to the Assembly that amendments 2, 3, 4, 12 and 13 to the draft resolution and amendments 6 to the draft recommendation, which were unanimously approved by the committee, should be declared as agreed by the Assembly. Is that so, Mrs. Engblom?
Yes, Madam Chair, that is the case.
Madam Engblom confirms that's the case. Does anyone object? If so, please ask for the floor by raising your hand in the hemicycle for those who are present or via the remote system. I see none. As there is no objection, I declare that amendments 2, 3, 4, 12 and 13 to the draft resolution and amendment 6 to the draft recommendation have been agreed. There is an objection to... No. Then I continue about this rejection of amendments in committee by 2/3 majority. Sorry. It's about this mask. I understand that the chairperson of the Committee on Equality and Non-Discrimination wishes to propose to the Assembly that amendments 7, 8, 9, 10, 14, 15 and 16 to the draft resolution, which were rejected by the committee with a 2/3 majority, be declared as rejected. Is that so, Mrs. Engblom?
It's the case. Thank you.
The chair, Madam Engblom, confirms that that's the case. Is there, as nobody objects, amendments 7, 8, 9, 10, 14, 15 and 16 are rejected. Is there? Yes, there is an objection. There is an objection here. Is it on virtual on the screen? Madame Antoniazzi. I'm not sure about the pronunciation, but the floor is yours, Antoniazzi.
Antoniazzi, yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say, with regard to my amendments and the amendments of the Labour Group in the UK, that Amendment 7 we would like to see passed because as I described in my speech, Amendment 7 to remove the words "and the United Kingdom" because we were actually 5th in the data that was used to present the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Madame Antoinette. If that's the case, we have to vote of it? No? Is there 10 persons that want to support this amendment? No? Objection. We need 10 persons to support the rejection to Mrs. Antoinette. Those who want to support Mrs. Antoinette have to raise in the plenary, and those who want to show their support in virtual, they have to raise their hand. I see there's not, it's only one. Only one in the plenary. What's on the screen? And one on the screen. Then it has not, it's 2, but it's not reached 10. So it has not reached 10. Can you confirm that, the Secretariat? Yes, they can confirm. So fewer than 10 members object, and so amendments 7, 8, 9, 10, 14, 15, and 16 are rejected. We will now consider the amendments individually, starting with the resolution, and then we will come to the recommendation. The amendments will be taken in the order in which they appear in the compendium, and I remind you that speeches on amendments are limited to 1 minute. And amendment number 1. I call Mrs. Beyer to support amendment 1. You have 1 minute. And Mrs. Beyer is present in the plenary. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. The report was written at a time where the Venice Commission had not delivered its opinion. Meanwhile, it has, and so that deletes the one sentence who asks the Venice Commission to deliver the opinion, which is already outdated.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? None in the plenary. Is there someone on the screen? Remotely, George Folks, the floor is yours. The floor is yours, Lord Folks.
Yeah, Madam President, a number of us tried to get in and to support Mrs. Antoinette. We raised points of order and we were ignored. You've moved on to a new amendment. We didn't have an opportunity. There was no way that we could express electronically our support for Mrs. Antoinette's amendment. There was nothing on the poll. 3 or 4 or 5 of us pressed the point of order button and it was ignored. You must go back to Mrs. Antoinette's amendment and give us all the right to support it.
Thank you, Mr. Folks. We had, sorry about that if we did not see us for the floor, but we have, even though we have 5 and that's less than 10.
No, we didn't.
Also wanted to take the floor and and address the views on that. So it's less than 10 even so.
No, we didn't have the opportunity to express it. How could we express it? We weren't given an opportunity to poll. There was no other way that we could express our support. So how could you get 10 when we didn't have the opportunity to indicate whether we supported it or not? You didn't ask for a poll. You should have asked for a poll so that we could express our support. There was no other way. 4 or 5 people I saw asked for a point of order, including myself, and there was no opportunity for us to express our support. If we'd been present, we would have stood in our place. Yeah. But we were not present, and there was no opportunity for us to express our support.
Thank you, Lord Fox. According to the rules, Mrs. Antonescu, she explained her position and she talked about, and then
Yes.
I asked if there are more than 10 or more that want to
Yes,
support
but-
her. But the suggestion to reject was explained, and that's only one,
No,
and that's
but you didn't-
related to
we-
1
we-
minute. Thank
We
you.
didn't have an opportunity to be part of the 10. How were we supposed to let you know that we wanted to support? We weren't asked to poll. There was no other way that we could express our support. We people who are remote are disadvantaged because we
It was-
can't express.
It was not a vote, it was 10 or more to support Mrs. Antonescu. So
But how do you know? How did you know?
Yeah, I have heard you, but I continue now. Because
But
it's
how did you know
according to
whether
the
those of
rules.
us who are remote were wanting to support her? You didn't give us a chance to express our views. How were we supposed to let you know? Please advise us. Otherwise, this will have to be challenged.
Thank you. I am advised that we have followed the rules. I have checked it several times now, and
No, you
it was explained the proposal to reject, and we asked for 10
But how
or
did you,
more
but
to
how did
support
you,
her.
how did you know whether I was in favor of it? How did you know? How was I supposed to express my view? I wasn't given an opportunity to express my view.
Thank you, Lord Fox. I have asked again several times, and this was not a vote. It was asking
I
for
know.
support, Mrs. Antonescu, and it
But
was
you haven't
still-
answered. How was I supposed to let you know? What method was there for me and for
Yeah,
other people who are
I
remote?
understand.
What was the method we should use? How should we let you know that we wanted to support?
Yeah, it was only to press the icon to speech, then you support her. That was what was asked you to do.
No, you didn't. No. With respect, you didn't. I pressed the speaking one. I pressed the point of order one.
Lord Fox, I did because we had 5 of you that did that. So obviously someone has heard it.
Well, was I one of them?
close this
Was I one of them?
conversation. I can give you the floor in the plenary. Point of order, yes.
I just want to support the previous speaker. I share his concerns.
You share his
Because,
concerns.
yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
And I also think Jeremy Corbyn has asked for the floor, a point of order, so I also allow that, and Kimmo, I also, yes? But for Jeremy Corbyn first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I support what George Fawkes has put forward? And can I suggest, as a way of moving forward, that you simply put the question back to the Assembly whether or not there are more than 10 people who wish the Antonacci Amendment to be voted upon. That will resolve this problem, and then we can all move on.
It will, but I just take other speakers that want to take the floor, point of order. And I think also...
Thank you very much. I may respect you chairing the meeting, but I would also totally agree with him. Let's do it, testing once again, asking opinion here and asking clearly opinion from distance. So then we can solve it quickly.
I totally agree with what has been said in that. We need to have the vote again.
Yeah. I see. I also have 3 more on the screen that want point of order, and I also see Mr. Howell in the plenary want point of order. And I think we have so many messages now that I think we have to go back, because even though I'm advised not to, but I think that would be the best. So there's no misunderstanding then that we take this fair. Okay. I just find the page, so we have to find, do it clear. I have
This one, this one.
We try to do it fair and in order with there's no misunderstanding. I do not want any misunderstanding. And I go not back to Mrs. Antoinetty because she has put on the table that she wants Amendment 7 voted in the chamber. And to that we need 10 people to support that we have a voting over Amendment 7. And I put that on the table. So people in the plenary raise their hand if they support Mrs. Antoinetty. And you who are on the screen, please use the vote and ask for the floor, and then we can see whether there is 10 or more. The vote is open. It's not open. No, there is not vote, but you have to it's okay. You can, you understand? And you can stand, those who support, stand up in the plenary, and those who are virtual. Is it more than 10? Yes. It's more than 10. Good. Then I do hope you are satisfied, so we can do this properly. Thank you. And then Amendment 7 on page. And I take it from there because I think that I call Mrs. Antoinetty to support Amendment 7 again. And you have 1 minute, so we take it in the right way. Can you ask for the floor, Mrs. Antoinetty?
Thank you very
There you are. Yes, please, we take it from start.
Thank you very much, Chair. In my 1 minute, I'd like to thank those that have supported the amendment. And the reason why I wanted to move this amendment is because the words "and the UK" are not relevant, where the UK is the 5th best country in the 49 countries that were on the Rainbow UK, the Rainbow Europe website, and I believe it is a misrepresentation. That is not to deny that we do have problems in the United Kingdom with rising hate crime. However, we are not to be put in the bracket with other countries that have worse crimes and rates of problems. And just to say thank you very much for everybody's support. This is very important to everybody in the United Kingdom and all of our LGBTQI community. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Antoinetty. Does anyone want to speak against the amendment? Yes. Present yourself.
Thank you. I think it's important, I also mentioned it in my speech, to make clear that hate and violence against LGBTI people is not only happening in countries in the eastern part of Europe, but also in the western part. And in the report, it's very clearly made clear what's happening in the UK with violent attacks on, in especially, trans people. So I think for a balanced report and a balanced resolution, it's very important also to mention it, because it is in the report, so it should be in the resolution as well.
Thank you. The position of the committee is that it has rejected the amendment by 2/3 majority. I shall now put the amendment to the vote, and the vote is open. Okay, thank you. The vote is closed, and I asked for the result. So it's rejected, Amendment 7 so far. Thank you, and then we go back and continue on the where last time I continue and I start with Amendment 1. Mrs. Beyer, you have supported this amendment, and I asked, does anyone want to speak against the amendment? Is there someone in the screen? No? What is the opinion of the committee on the amendment?
The committee was in favor by a large majority.
Favor, large majority. I shall now put the amendment to the vote, and the vote is open. And I think the vote is closed. I ask for the result. And the Amendment 1 is agreed to. We continued with Amendment number 2, and I will... Yes, and then unanimously.
Page 17, please.
And then we continue on Amendment number 11, and I call Mrs. Antoinette to support Amendment 11, and you have 1 minute. Can you ask for the floor, Mrs. Antoinette? Is she there?
Yes, sorry. The problems with hybrid are quite frustrating for everybody, Chair. I'd like to speak to Amendment 11. We wanted to have the words based on their sex inserted, as well as the other words that were there, because we recognise that sex is a protected characteristic, particularly under the Equality Act in the United Kingdom, and therefore I am pleased that the committee did support this amendment and the other ones that we laid, and I hope that everybody will be able to vote for them. I'll make no further comment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Antoniazzi. And does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? I see none in the plenary. Is there some on the screen? No. What is the opinion of the committee on this amendment?
Madam Chair, as Madam Antoniazzi said, the committee was in favour by a large majority.
The committee was in favour by a large majority. I shall now put the amendment to the vote, and the vote is open. And then the vote is closed, and I call for the result to be displayed. And Amendment 11 is agreed to. And then we continue to Amendment number 5. And that's an oral sub-amendment, and I have been informed that Mr. Benchika wishes to propose an oral sub-amendment to Amendment 5. First, I call Mrs. Beyer to support Amendment 5, and you have 1 minute.
Thank you very much. I just have to find it. This amendment elaborates on what concrete is meant when we talk about discrimination on the ground of sexual identity, and it delivers some concrete examples.
Thank you so much. Mr. Benchika wishes to propose an oral sub-amendment as follows. In Amendment 5, replace the words "and gender identity" with the words "gender identity and sex characteristics." In my opinion, the oral sub-amendment is in order under our rules. However, do 10 or more members object to the oral sub-amendment being debated? And please, could those who object raise their hand in the hemicycle? And for those who are on the remote system, use to ask for the floor. 10 or more members, we have to have 10 or more members. So it's the same procedure as last time we had a debate on that. I see none in the plenary. What's the result on the screen? One on the screen. That's obviously less than 10. So, fewer than 10 members object to the oral sub-amendments being debated. Therefore, I call Mr. Benchika to support his oral sub-amendment. You have 1 minute.
Madam Chair, this will bring the wording into line with the rest of the draft resolution and ensure intersex people are included. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Does anyone wish to speak against the oral sub-amendment? I see none in the plenary. Is there someone on the screen? No? What is the opinion of the mover of the main amendment, Mrs. Beyer?
Yeah, totally fine with the sub-amendment.
Fine by Mrs. Beyer, and I assume that the committee is in favor. Yes, the chair of the committee confirms that. I will now put the oral sub-amendment to the vote, and the vote is open. Thank you, and the vote is closed. And I call for the result to be displayed. And the oral sub-amendment is agreed to. And then we continue, we have to continue to consider the main amendments 5 as amended. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? No, amendment 5. I see none in the plenaries. There is no one on the screen. No, it's none on the screen. What is the opinion of the committee on the amendment?
The committee was unanimously in favour, Madam President.
Unanimously in favour, the committee was. I shall now put Amendment 5 to the vote, and the vote is open. And the vote is closed, and I call for the result to be displayed. And Amendment 5 is agreed to. And then we continue to Amendment... No? Then we continue to the draft resolution, I think, and that's... Now we will proceed to vote on the draft resolution contained in document 15425 as amended, and the vote is open. And the vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. Thank you. And the draft resolution in document 15425 is adopted. Thank you. And then we go to consideration of amendments, draft recommendation. In addition to the resolution the Assembly has just considered, the Committee on Social Affairs, Health and Sustainable Development has presented a draft recommendation in document 15425, to which one amendment has been tabled. I remind you, no? Yes. And I remind you that the Assembly has already adopted the amendment, which was unanimously agreed to by the committee. And we continue now. We will now proceed to vote on the draft recommendation contained in document 15425, and the vote is opened. Thank you, and the vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. Thank you. And the draft recommendation, document 15/425, is adopted. And the Committee, Equality and Non-Discrimination, has presented a draft resolution in document 15/429, to which no amendment have been tabled. We will now proceed to vote on the draft resolution contained in document 15/429, and the vote is open. The vote is closed, and I call for the result to be displayed. Thank you, and the draft resolution in document 15/429 is adopted. Thank you. I see on the screen that Mr. Mogens Jensen from Denmark has asked for the floor. Maybe it's a point of order. I want to listen to what you have to say. There I see you, Mr. Jensen. The floor is yours. I do not hear you. We do not hear you. There you are.
Ægtefælle, del og så videre. Alt, hvad der drejer sig om opkvalificering og forskellige andre spørgsmål. Og så er det bare også, hvis vi kan få vores presseafdeling og andre til at lave dem, så kan man sige til folk, her kan I se, hvad det er, I rent faktisk får. Og så det der med beløbsordning, det bliver jo beskyldt for, at vi har lavet løftegrund. Det synes jeg ikke, det er noget stort, og fordi det er meget, meget lille område, det løser ikke de udfordringer, vi har.
Mr. Jensen, I think you are speaking in Danish. I understand you, but not the rest of the plenary or those on the screen, and the Swedish, of course.
Hvad kan vi gøre for de der 45-50.000 unge mennesker, for dem med ind på arbejdsmarkedet, sporskifte, en lang række forskellige ting og sager. Og det håber jeg, at
Mr. Jensen, please listen to me, because you spoke in Danish.
Så jeg håber, at der bliver lyttet, men også der bliver...
I think, Mr. Jensen, I understood you, and the Swedish colleagues also, maybe the Finnish, but the rest of the plenary did not understand. But I do think you had a message about the technical problems, so it should be clearer. But if you're not in a situation where you can talk English, maybe German, so on. You have several possibilities. There's a technical problem with the online system because it's okay again, yes. Mr. Jensen, I ask you once more because I think you had a serious message, point of order. Is it possible that you can repeat it in English, German? You have several choices. Can you ask for the floor again, Mr. Jensen? Or maybe you can write it also in the messages. No, he's not there. Okay, then I think we have to Then I think we have to take a short break, 10 minutes, because we start about 12 to address Mr. Zeljko Komsic, Chairperson of the Presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and we have to wait for that. So a short break on 10 minutes.
Hello, sir. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. I can also hear
Yeah.
you. I think
Okay.
maybe if you can just not have a background with so much light, maybe we could be.
I'm sorry.
Okay, it's
I'm
not possible.
sorry. I'm at my home, and at the same time I'm
Okay, no
corona
problem.
infected.
It should have been better, but it will be okay like that. So see you in a few minutes at 12. Okay. Just
Okay.
7 minutes. Okay.
Thank you.
dear colleagues, can we continue our meeting of this morning? The next item of business this morning is the address by Mr. Zeljko Komsic, the Chairperson of the Presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which will be followed by questions to Mr. Komsic. I would like to inform members that, who are present in the chamber that they can follow the original speech on Channel 8. Members connected remotely, including the chairman of the presidency, can follow by switching to the channel called Special BCMS. Now I want to welcome His Excellency Mr. Zeljko Komsic, the current chair of the presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Good to see you again, Mr. President, although you are far away at home, as I understood. But in modern times, we are able to communicate even at distance. Mr. President, we are very happy that you are joining us today virtually. The 24th of April this year, 22, will mark the 20th anniversary of Bosnia and Herzegovina's membership of the Council of Europe. A very good occasion to take stock of the achievements and continuing cooperation, including with the Parliamentary Assembly. I myself, as the former rapporteur on your great country, had the privilege to visit your country several times, and I'm really happy that we now have you here as the President in our Assembly to talk about your country, its possibilities and its problems. For the Council of Europe, Mr. President, and our Assembly, the key objective is to work closely with all member states and support them in their efforts to uphold human rights, democracy and the rule of law, and preserve peace in our continent. And of course, with regard to Bosnia and Herzegovina, peace is a very clear and concrete issue. Maintaining the stability and the democratic rule in Bosnia and Herzegovina is essential also for our work. We therefore are very honored to have you among us today, and we look forward to hearing from you on how we can further develop also our collaboration on shared values to consolidate democracy, human rights and the rule of law in Bosnia and Herzegovina. As you know, Mr. President, this Assembly is strongly committed to continue supporting the democratic developments in your great country, particularly in the context of the ongoing constitutional and electoral reforms, with a view to strengthening in a meaningful way the country's democratic institutions and ensuring compliance with relevant judgments of the European Court of Human Rights. I have said enough, Mr. President. I give you now the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity to addressing you on, let's say, unusual way. But at the same time, I have to say I'm addressing you from my home at Sarajevo and not from Presidency because I'm corona infected right now. And if you don't mind, I will proceed on my language. Poštovani predsjedniče, poštovane zastupnice i zastupnici u Parlamentarnoj skupštini Vijeća Europe. Dozvolite mi da vam se na početku mog izlaganja zahvalim na prilici da se obratim Parlamentarnoj skupštini i to u godini kada Bosna i Hercegovina obilježava 20 godina od prijema u Vijeće Europe. Isto tako, dozvolite mi da kao način mog obraćanja koristim savremene tehnologije kako bismo zajedno poštovali sve mjere uzrokovane novim talasom povećanja zaraze virusom COVID-19, što svakako neće utjecati na mogućnost da vam iznesem trenutnu društveno-političku situaciju u mojoj zemlji. Naravno, moje izlaganje ću iznijeti kroz posebnu prizmu onih temeljnih vrijednosti Vijeća Europe za koje se lično i kontinuirano zalažem u svome radu, a za koje sam siguran kako i građani Bosne i Hercegovine žele vidjeti ugrađene u politički i društveni sistem naše zemlje. Zato ću na samom početku izlaganja kratko osvrnuti se na glavne principe utvrđene prilikom osnivanja Vijeća Europe 1949. godine. A to su zaštita ljudskih prava, višestranačka parlamentarna demokratija i vladavina prava, širenje spoznaja o evropskom identitetu, zaključivanje specifičnih međunarodnih ugovora, osiguranje jedinstva kontinenta i traženje rješenja za društvene probleme u Europi. Razumljiv je povod za takve ciljeve nakon okončanja Drugog svjetskog rata. U ratom opustošenoj Europi mnoge zemlje su bile u procesu tranzicije prema temeljnim principima liberalne demokratije, što u to vrijeme nije bio ni malo lak zadatak. Tadašnji kontekst, posebno onaj geopolitičke prirode, doveo je do stvaranja dva pola, izrazito ideološke prirode. Jedan okrenut prema liberalnoj demokratiji i tržišnoj ekonomiji, a drugi ka komunističkoj doktrini i centraliziranoj ekonomiji. Odnosno, tada je na globalnom planu stvoren bipolarni svjetski poredak koji je trajao skoro 5 decenija, sve do pada Berlinskog zida, kada je započet cijeli niz tranzicijskih procesa u različitim europskim državama. Danas, međutim, imamo potpuno drugačije geopolitičke odnose u svijetu, temeljene na multipolarnom svjetskom poretku i razvoju interesa globalnih sila, koji se produciraju i manifestuju u različitim zemljama svijeta. U takvim okolnostima postoji jedan broj zemalja koje nisu okončale svoj tranzicijski proces prema načelima liberalne demokratije i tržišne privrede, što ih svrstava u veoma lak plijen za različite geopolitičke interese velikih igrača. Moja država, Bosna i Hercegovina, zemlja sa tradicijom dugom skoro 1000 godina, koja je u različitim vremenskim periodima imala svoja različita uređenja. U jednom periodu je bila kraljevina, taj period je trajao nekoliko vijekova i moja zemlja je tada u svom teritorijalnom smislu bila najveća zemlja u ovom regionu. Imali smo nakon toga osvajanje Bosne i Hercegovine od strane različitih imperija i carstava, koja su donosila svoju kulturu, običaj i vjeru, ugrađujući ih u društveni sistem moje zemlje. Ipak, Bosna i Hercegovina je sve to preživjela i nadživjela takve imperije i carstva. Tokom Drugog svjetskog rata građani Bosne i Hercegovine se masovno priključuju antifašističkom pokretu, učestvujući na strani onih snaga koji su se borile protiv fašizma u Drugom svjetskom ratu. Istovremeno, tokom Drugog svjetskog rata, građani Bosne i Hercegovine donose odluku o obnovi naše državnosti i priključenju tadašnjoj Jugoslaviji u zajednicu sa drugim tadašnjim republikama. Učešće Bosne i Hercegovine u nekadašnjoj Jugoslaviji trajalo je sve do marta 1992. godine, kada su građani kroz svoje izjašnjenje na referendumu odlučili da Bosna i Hercegovina bude suverena i nezavisna država. Iste godine donosi se Ustav Republike Bosne i Hercegovine kao demokratski izraz njenih građana, koji već tada sadržava temeljne principe liberalne demokratije i tržišne ekonomije, čak istovjetne principe koji su ugrađeni u temelje Vijeća Europe. Bosna i Hercegovina je maja 1992. godine primljena u članstvo Ujedinjenih nacija, te je na taj način ostvarila status subjekta međunarodnog prava. U ovim pobrojanim vremenskim periodima Bosna i Hercegovina nikad nije bila zemlja podijeljenog ili segmentiranog društva, niti je postojao bilo koji oblik diskriminacije njenih građana. Međutim, proglašenje nezavisnosti Bosne i Hercegovine dovelo je do agresivne reakcije susjednih zemalja, koji su u periodu ratnih dešavanja od 1992. do 1995. godine ili agresije na moju zemlju, putem njihovih ratnih i osvajačkih aktivnosti nastojale poništiti bilo kakvo postojanje Bosne i Hercegovine i preuzeti dijelove njene teritorije. Takve ratne aktivnosti dovele su do nezapamćenih strahota koje su eskalirale sve do počinjenja zločina genocida, ratnih zločina, zločina protiv čovječnosti i etničkog čišćenja. Sve elemente koje sam pomenuo utvrdio je u svojim presudama Međunarodni sud za bivšu Jugoslaviju sa sjedištem u Hagu. U tim presudama utvrđeno je postojanje više udruženih zločinačkih poduhvata u kojima su sudjelovali pojedinci i grupe iz Bosne i Hercegovine kao i one iz susjednih zemalja, kojima je cilj bio uspostavljanje etničkih čistih teritorija kako bi tako očišćene teritorije pripojili svojim zemljama. Ovo sve navodim iz razloga što ću u drugom dijelu svoga izlaganja jasno ukazati da su takve politike prisutne i danas u Bosni i Hercegovini, ali da su metod ratnog osvajanja zamijenili političkim i diplomatskim sredstvima, odnosno takvi i dalje nastoje da realizuju svoje ratne ciljeve, ali u mirnodopskim uvjetima. Rat u Bosni i Hercegovini okončan je potpisivanje opšteg okvirnog sporazuma za mir, koji je parafiran u Dejtonu, a potpisan u Parizu 1995. godine. Njega su potpisali Republika Bosna i Hercegovina, Republika Hrvatska i Savezna Republika Jugoslavija, čiji je danas pravni sljednik današnja Srbija. Odnosno, kako to međunarodno pravo jasno kaže, mirovni sporazum u pravilu potpisuju učesnici u ratu. Time se otklanja svaka dilema da je u Bosni i Hercegovini bio na dijelu građanski rat, jer se radilo o međudržavnom oružanom sukobu koji je to, između ostalog, i kako je to utvrdio Međunarodni sud u Hagu iz više svojih presuda. Sastavni dio tog sporazuma, kojeg svi kolokvijalno nazivamo Dejtonski sporazum, je i Ustav Bosne i Hercegovine, kao njegov aneks 4. Dakle, očito se radi o oktrojisanom ustavu koji nije izraz demokratske volje građana Bosne i Hercegovine, već je riječ o dokumentu koji je sastavnim dijelom jednog mirovnog sporazuma. Njime je Bosna i Hercegovina definisana kao zemlja u kojoj postoje dva entiteta i jedan distrikt uz postojanje različitih etničkih zajednica. U tom ustavu, kojeg svi naravno moramo poštovati, ostalo je mnoštvo otvorenih pitanja i nedorečenosti, što je ostavilo veliki prostor za različita proizvoljna tumačenja ili interpretacije. Najčešće inspirisane, nažalost, partikularnim interesima različitih političkih elita, kako onih u Bosni i Hercegovini, tako i u susjednim zemljama. Tim ustavom uspostavljen je jedan novi politički sistem u Bosni i Hercegovini koji je trebao evoluirati prema demokratskim standardima i vrijednostima, kao što su one vrijednosti sadržane u ciljevima Vijeća Evrope. Nažalost, to se nikada nije desilo. Nasuprot tome, aktivne etničke politike u Bosni i Hercegovini nastojale su i danas još uvijek nastoje kreirati vještački podijeljeno i segmentirano društvo u kojem dominira pripadnost nekoj etničkih zajednica kao jedini validan iskaz za političko djelovanje. Iako je Evropska konvencija o ljudskim pravima i temeljnim slobodama sastavnim dijelom Ustava Bosne i Hercegovine, moramo ovdje istaći kako se ona, nažalost, premalo implementira u Bosni i Hercegovini. Njihov povod za takve ambicije krije se u tom nesretnom terminu, moram reći nesretnom terminu, konstituentnosti ili konstitutivnosti, koji jeste spomenut u Ustavu Bosne i Hercegovine, ali u njemu nije nigdje rečeno ništa više, niti je pravno razrađen, niti je rečeno i utvrđeno šta on zaista znači. Zato se javila nova pravna praksa koju smatram jako opasnom, da se kroz korištenje termina konstitutivnost ostvaruju različiti politički ciljevi u čemu učestvuju domaći politički akteri uz vidnu političku podršku iz susjednih zemalja. U takvoj, po mome mišljenju, pogrešnoj političkoj i pravnoj praksi, nečija etnička pripadnost postaje condicio sine qua non za bilo koji oblik političkog djelovanja, koji ide toliko duboko da se čak ne može dobiti ni najobičniji posao ako niste odgovarajuće etničke pripadnosti. Mislim na posao u državnoj službi i administraciji. Zato nije vidan oblik sistemske diskriminacije koja nažalost postoji u mojoj zemlji. Kao legalista ovdje na ovom mjestu mogu slobodno reći kako se konstitutivnost zapravo izvorom postojanja sistemske diskriminacije u Bosni i Hercegovini, što je utvrđeno u 5 presuda Evropskog suda za ljudska prava iz Strasbura, koje vam želim hronološki prikazati. Presude Sejdić-Finci, presuda Zornić, presuda Pilav, presuda Šlaku i presuda Pudarić. U tim presudama jasno je utvrđeno postojanje diskriminacije temeljeno na etničkoj pripadnosti i mjestu prebivališta, te je naloženo tuženoj strani, odnosno državi Bosne i Hercegovine, da izvrši neophodne izmjene svog ustava iz kojeg se svi elementi diskriminacije moraju izbaciti. Nažalost, tako nešto se nije desilo. Ako pogledamo kako je to rečeno u presudi Sejdić-Vinci, onda ćemo vidjeti kako je diskriminacija po etničkoj osnovi izvedenica koja proizilazi iz rasne diskriminacije. Da li nam tako nešto treba u sadašnjoj Europi i u modernoj liberalnom demokratskom poretku? Pitanje je za sve nas, a ne samo za Bosnu i Hercegovinu. Potpuno sam siguran da ćemo se svi složiti da nam takvi pravni ili čak ustavni okviri ne trebaju i da moramo svi zajedno uložiti napore u borbi protiv svih oblika diskriminacije. Posebno je interesantan dio presude Zornić, u kojem se jasno govori da Bosna i Hercegovina nema potpunu demokratiju, već limitiranu i ograničenu demokratiju kroz raspodjelu političke moći između etničkih zajednica koje se u mojoj zemlji nazivaju konstitutivni narodi. Taj nedostatak potpune demokratije zapravo je u potpunoj suprotnosti sa jednim od temeljnih ciljeva Vijeća Europe. Zato se u presudi Zornić nalaže da izmjenom svog ustava Bosna i Hercegovina omoguće ostvarivanje potpune demokratije u kojoj će postojati neophodna jednakost svakog građana na mojoj zemlji. To je jako važno pitanje. Kako drugačije možemo ostvariti vladavinu prava ili organizirati pravnu državu ako svi građani bilo koje zemlje, pa tako i Hercegovine, nisu jednaki pred zakonom bez izuzetka? Kako možemo ostvariti liberalnu demokratiju u čijoj srži je borba jednakosti protiv svih oblika nejednakosti, ako znamo da se u Bosni i Hercegovini politički forsira nametanje sistema nejednakosti? Onda to svakako nije liberalna demokratija, što svakako smatram i neprihvatljivim. Očito je kako sadašnji politički sistem u Bosni i Hercegovini temeljen na etničkoj pripadnosti stvara tri paralelna, totalitarna sistema, temeljena na pripadnošću nekoj od tri etničke zajednice kojima se nastoji vladati na autokratski način. U takvom sistemu, kroz pripadnost nekoj od etničkih zajednica, kao izraz isključivosti etničkih politika, zapravo se nastoji vladati resursima, poslovima, tenderima, javnim nabavkama, svim vrstama privilegija, profita ili koristi, čime se vidno kreira ambijent za postojanje korupcije nesagledivih razmjera. Nakon 26 godina od potpisivanja Dejtonskog sporazuma, umjesto evolucije političkog sistema Bosne i Hercegovine, u onaj temeljen na demokratiji i vladavini prava, moja zemlja ide regresivnim putem u kojem se kroz nazadovanje ili udaljavanje od demokratije želi zadržati, pa čak i zadržati etnički politički sistem koji generiše korupciju u svim porama društva kroz korištenje etničkih politika i manipulaciju strahom pripadnika različitih etničkih zajednica. Zato je važno reći da etničke politike u Bosni i Hercegovini, kada iscrpe sve druge alate kako bi ovladali svojom etničkom zajednicom, posežu za emocijama i empatijom unutar svojih zajednica. To se postiže kroz produciranje straha koji konačnici formira sistem pogodan za korupciju i negiranje vladavine prava. Vjerujem da tako dijelimo isto mišljenje. Takav politički sistem nema mjesta u modernoj Europi. Dozvolite mi da ovom prilikom u nekoliko rečenica se osvrnem na različite ideje onih koji nastoje održati princip nejednakosti u Bosni i Hercegovini, koji predlažu uvođenje konsocijacijske demokratije kroz navodno kopiranje političkih sistema Belgije, Švicarske, Sjeverne Irske ili Južnog Tirola. Tu postoje najmanje dva problema. Prvo, što konsocijacijska demokratija nije isto što i liberalna demokratija, niti postoji u pomenutim zemljama ili dijelovima drugih zemalja onako kako je konsocijacijska demokratija uopšte zamišljena. Takve zemlje ili dijelovi pojedinih zemalja imaju potpuno drugačiji istorijski kontekst od Bosne i Hercegovine da bi se njihov politički sistemi mogli koristiti u mojoj zemlji. Drugi problem je taj da bi eventualno uvođenje konsocijacijske demokratije u Bosni i Hercegovini zasigurno dovelo do novih postupaka pred Europskim sudom za ljudska prava, jer takva vrsta političkog modela je temeljena na nejednakosti i poništavanju temeljnih principa liberalne demokratije, bez obzira što ona kao svoj princip sadrži elemente proporcionalne i zastupljene. Koristiti takve davno prevaziđene političke modele bilo bi zasigurno korak unazad u Bosni i Hercegovini. Takve politike idu toliko daleko da negiraju postojanje bosansko-hercegovačke nacije, zemlje koja postoji skoro 1000 godina. već svaki izraz nacionalnosti žele prikazati kroz etničko pitanje. Želim danas kazati da sam ja u skladu sa standardima evropskim po svojoj nacionalnosti naravno Bosanac i Hercegovac, a etnički Hrvat, jer je nacija izraz pripadnosti vlastitoj državi. Susjedne zemlje negiraju bosansko-hercegovačku naciju nastojeći koristiti etničke identitete u mojoj zemlji u njihovu korist. Stvarajući takav ambijent da bismo mi, Bosanci i Hercegovci, trebali njih pitati za saglasnost, smijemo li uopće po nacionalnom opredjeljenju biti Bosanci i Hercegovci. To je apsolutno neprihvatljivo i u potpunoj suprotnosti sa Evropskom konvencijom o ljudskim pravima i temeljnim slobodama. S druge strane, kada sagledamo sistem odlučivanja danas u Bosni i Hercegovini, imamo takvu situaciju da se postojanje bilo kakve većine u donjem domu parlamenta, odnosno na izborima direktno izabranim donjim domovima zakonodavnih organa vlasti, u cijelosti poništava kroz jedan novi politički alat koji se zove entitetsko glasanje. To u najkraćem znači da u zastupničkom domu Parlamentarne skupštine Bosne i Hercegovine u donjem domu, koji broji 42 zastupnika, njih najmanje 5 mogu zakočiti bilo kakvo odlučivanje jer dolaze iz jednog od dva entiteta. Da li je tako nešto izraz liberalne demokracije? Naravno da nije. Jer očito da politička manjina može zakočiti donošenje bilo kojih odluka na štetu političke većine sve dok se toj manjini ne udovolji. Tako nešto imamo danas u Bosni i Hercegovini, koja se putem očitih separatističkih aktivnosti drži u političko-talačkoj krizi, u čijoj konačnici se krije sistem blokada, ucjena i držanja Bosne i Hercegovine u potpunoj političkoj neizvjesnosti, sve dok se ne ispune želje i namjere pojedinih političkih lidera. Zar to nije izraz potpune autokratije i nedostatka temeljnih principa demokracije? I da stvar bude još gora, povod za držanje Bosne i Hercegovine u stanju krize nalazi se u tome što neko neće da prihvati presude Međunarodnog suda iz Haga, kojima je utvrđen zločin genocida. Zamislite ovom prilikom šta bi nepoštivanje odluka bilo kojeg suda značilo u vašim zemljama. Nesumnjivo, krivičnu odgovornost oni koji ne poštuju presude sudova. Slično je i sa odlučivanjem u Gornjem domu Parlamentarne skupštine Bosne i Hercegovine pod nazivom Dom naroda, koji se sastoji od 15 posredno delegiranih zastupnika koji imenuju političke stranke, je samo njih dvojica mogu zakočiti donošenje bilo koje odluke i to na način da svih 42 zastupnika iz zastupničkog doma mogu jednoglasno donijeti neku odluku, a da samo njih dvoje iz Doma naroda sve to mogu oboriti jer je potrebna odgovarajuća entitetska većina. Zato nije vidan pokazatelj nejednakosti glasa zastupnika u dva doma Parlamentarne skupštine Bosne i Hercegovine, gdje glas jednog zastupnika iz Doma naroda, kojeg imenuju političke stranke, ima najmanje trostruko veću vrijednost od delegata iz zastupničkog doma kojeg biraju građani Bosne i Hercegovine. To se danas koristi kao političko sredstvo kako bi se onemogućilo normalno funkcionisanje institucija vlasti u Bosni i Hercegovini sa potpunim zanemarivanjem temeljnih demokratskih principa i to smatram neprihvatljivim. Iz tih razloga postoji najnovija apelacija prema Europskom sudu za ljudska prava koja se tiče nejednakosti glasa u dva zakonodavna doma u Bosni i Hercegovini. Nažalost, primjena koncepta konstitutivnih naroda i etničkog glasanja u svakodnevnom političkom odlučivanju institucijama Bosne i Hercegovine već 26 godina ne služi zaštiti prava konstitutivnih naroda, već sprečavanju Bosne i Hercegovine da se stabilizuje i napreduje. Od 2008. godine, kada je Bosna i Hercegovina potpisala sporazum o stabilizaciji i pridruživanju s Evropskom unijom, stranke koje podržavaju etnički zasnovan sistem odlučivanja koriste etničke kvote u donošenju odluka izvršnim i zakonodavnim tijelima kako bi spriječili usvajanje evropskih standarda. Zakoni koji se tiču usvajanja pravne stečevine Evropske unije padaju upravo u domovima naroda na etničkom glasanju ili na entitetskom glasanju u zastupničkom domu. To se redovno događa iako zakoni iz pravne stečevine Evropske unije ne diraju u etnički identitet, kulturu, tradiciju, jezik i obrazovanje kao vrijednosti koje domovi naroda treba da štiti. Iz tog razloga U parlamentarnoj proceduri stoje desetine zakona iz Evropske agende. Zato ne možemo popuniti Ustavni sud Federacije, zato nema imenovanja upravnih tijela mnogih nezavisnih agencija za provođenje zakona, zato nam propadaju sredstva iz evropskih fondova. Mnogo toga drugog na štetu svih građana Bosne i Hercegovine, a sve pod krinkom borbe za legitimne etničke interese konstitutivnih naroda. To je također neprihvatljivo. Ovdje se stoga radi o zloupotrebi prava konstitutivnih naroda radi sprečavanja Bosne i Hercegovine da postane dijelom civilizirane zajednice evropskih parlamentarnih demokracija i kako moja zemlja nikad ne bi mogla postati zemljom članicom Evropske unije. Takve politike imaju namjeru da od moje zemlje naprave teritoriju nad kojom će utjecaj imati strani režimi, bilo ekonomskim putem, bilo stvaranjem novih transnjestrija na Zapadnom Balkanu od jednog dijela moje zemlje. Želim podsjetiti da je Europska komisija precizno pravno identificirala u mišljenju iz 2019. sve što moja zemlja treba naprijediti kako bi nastavila svoj drugi put ka kandidatskom statusu. U tom trenutku politički akteri koji zagovaraju nestanak Bosne i Hercegovine odlučili su da zaustave sve procese i vrate 3,5 miliona ljudi unatrag u 1995. godinu, pričom o pravima konstitutivnih naroda, vraćanju nadležnosti entiteta i konačno anticivilizacijskim otporom prema kažnjavanju, negiranja genocida i ratnih zločina koji su već presuđeni. U današnje vrijeme kada se u Bosni i Hercegovini govori o potrebi za izmjenom Ustava izbornog zakona sa ciljem implementiranja 5 presuda Europskog suda za ljudska prava, opet imamo pojavu onih političkih snaga koje nemaju namjeru implementirati te presude, već kroz izraz političke manipulacije kreirati novi ustavni aranžman i izborni sistem sa dubljom diskriminacijom koja bi bila zaklonjena iza nejednake vrijednosti glasa građana Bosne i Hercegovine. U tome, nažalost, svoje direktno učešće imaju i susjedne zemlje, čiji je cilj veoma jasan. Ostvariti sve ratne ciljeve koristeći politička i diplomatska sredstva u mirnodopskim uvjetima. Njihova namjera ogleda se u dva aspekta. Prvi je da kroz izmjenu Ustava izbornog zakona Bosne i Hercegovine kreiraju takav sistem u kojem će te susjedne zemlje imati zlatnu dionicu ili ključnu riječ u donošenju svih odluka u Bosni i Hercegovini, a time i potpunu kontrolu nad mojom zemljom. Takve namjere lako ćete prepoznati svaki put kada oni govore o konstitutivnosti naroda ili u frazi da će prihvatiti sve što se 3 etničke zajednice dogovore. Bez obzira što one time vrše udar na temelje demokratije, ljudskih prava i vladavine prava, one tako nešto često rade i u diplomatskim razgovorima, pa čak i sa vama, sa čim ste, vjerujem, i vi povremeno suočeni. Drugo, kada vide da tako nešto ne može uspjeti, onda oni posežu za njihovim saveznicima u Bosni i Hercegovini koji u ime tih susjednih zemalja vrše blokade rada institucija Bosne i Hercegovine, nastojeći stvoriti privid da je Bosna i Hercegovina nefunkcionalna država. Dodatno, susjedne zemlje, osim što vrše upad u politički sistem moje zemlje, nastoje kroz njihove političke satelite u Bosni i Hercegovini imati potpunu kontrolu nad prirodnim i svim drugim resursima moje zemlje. Kako drugačije objasniti političke namjere susjednih zemalja da se ne utvrdi granica sa Bosnom i Hercegovinom putem međunarodnog ugovora o granici, kako na kopnu, tako i na moru, a sve sa ciljem da oni imaju mogućnost upravljanja prirodnim resursima Bosne i Hercegovine. Zato koristim ovu priliku da vas sve zajedno zamolim da ne prihvatate takvu vrstu diplomatskih razgovora jer se time nanosi šteta Bosne i Hercegovine i njenim građanima. I na kraju, iskoristio bih priliku da vam ukažem na moju viziju rješenja za Bosnu i Hercegovinu. Kao prvo, smatram i od toga odustati ne mogu. Potrebno je ostvariti jednakost svakog građana Bosne i Hercegovine kako bismo stvorili društvo jednakih šansi. Time bismo otklonili sve vidove diskriminacije koje nosi taj fenomen konstitutivnosti naroda, za kojeg još jednom želim istaći da se radi o principu i alatu za stvaranje ambijenta nesagledive i neprekidne korupcije ili društva u kojem ne uspijevaju najbolji među nama, već podobne i familijarno nepotistički vezane osobe. sistem u kojem dominira sistemska korupcija nije prihvatljiv ni za jedno savremeno društvo, pa tako ni za Bosnu i Hercegovinu. Kao drugo, potrebno je izvršiti izmjenu političkog sistema Bosne i Hercegovine na način da se ograničene ili limitirane demokratije pređemo na sistem potpune demokratije na način kako je to utvrđeno u 5 presuda Europskog suda za ljudska prava, ali i u skladu sa mišljenjem Venecijanske komisije iz 2005. godine koja je analitički, tačno i pravno precizno ukazala na sve izmjene koje Bosna i Hercegovina mora obaviti ako želi biti dijelom modernih demokratskih društava. Zato želim iskoristiti ovu priliku da vas sve zamolim da se upoznate sa mišljenjem Venecijanske komisije u Bosni i Hercegovini iz 2005. godine, jer je veoma važno da njeno mišljenje prihvatimo kao pomoć Vijeća Europe državama u tranziciji. Najzad, izmjene Ustava izbornog zakona Bosne i Hercegovine ne mogu biti obavljene ako se u tim izmjenama neće uvažiti temeljni princip liberalne demokratije, ljudskih prava i vladavine prava, jer sve drugo moju zemlju vodi u dodatnu nestabilnost, a time i nestabilnost cijeloj regiji Zapadnog Balkana. Svi mi dobro znamo da je građanin, pojedinac, nositelj suvereniteta svoje zemlje, što se isto mora primijeniti u Bosni i Hercegovini. Koristim ovu priliku da vas sve zajedno zamolim da ne pristajete na sve one diplomatske i političke razgovore koje žele nanijeti štetu Bosni i Hercegovini, a takve ćete razgovore veoma lako prepoznati. Oni će biti izvan temeljnih principa Vijeća Europe. Zahvaljujem na vašoj pažnji.
And may I thank you, Mr. President, for your vision to the recent history of your country, the actual situation, including its problems and possible way out, according to you, in the direction of modernization of Bosnia and Herzegovina towards a democratic society, a modern democratic society, as you called it. You agreed, Mr. President, that we would take questions from our members, and to facilitate it a bit, because you are there in your isolation, we will now ask the 5 speakers of political groups to address their questions to you, and then you will answer them, and then we will see how much time we still have left for other questions, because there are quite a lot of them. First in the debate, I call, on behalf of the group of the Socialists, Democrats and Green, Mr. Gerardo Giovanoli from San Marino. Mr. Giovanoli, you have the floor. 1 minute.
Grazie Presidente Cox e grazie Chairman Komsic. L'odierna fase politica bosniaca sembra aver assunto caratteri assai preoccupanti per il livello raggiunto dalle affermazioni di alcuni esponenti politici di massimo livello e dalle azioni concrete che ne sono seguite verso una politica di separazione e divisione in contrasto con i termini essenziali dell'accordo di Dayton e contro la sovranità della Bosnia e Herzegovina. La tensione politica occlude la possibilità di costruire e condividere il progresso della Bosnia e Herzegovina come Stato europeo di profonda importanza per la vita dell'Europa e per la costruzione della sua Unione. La mia domanda è: cosa possono fare gli Stati d'Europa, dai più piccoli ai più grandi, per sostenere la stabilità e il progresso della Bosnia-Herzegovina in questa fase critica, e in bocca al lupo per la pronta uscita dalla positività al Covid. Grazie.
Thank you, Mr. Giovanoli. We now go to the question on behalf of the group of the EPP. It will be asked by Mr. Reinhold Lopatka from Austria. Sie haben das Wort, Herr Lopatka.
Dear President, dear colleagues, I think that the speech of the President was not an optimistic one. And indeed, the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina is not a good one. 12 years after the delivery of the judgment of the European Court of Human Rights in the Sejdic and Finci case, we still wait for necessary reforms. And also the Constitutional Court of Bosnia and Herzegovina is calling for it. Of course, our political group, EPP-CT, supports the territorial integrity of Bosnia and Herzegovina and also the equality of all three constituent people. I think this is essential for peace and lasting stability in the entire region. We request Bosnia-Herzegovina to adopt the necessary reforms. And my concrete question is, will this issue be addressed before the next elections?
Dank u zeer, Herr Lopatka. Now, the next speaker on behalf of the ECDA group is Lord Alexander Dundee from the United Kingdom. Alexander, you have the floor.
Mr. President, along with colleagues, while thanking you very much for joining us today.
Sorry, Alexander, sorry, you have to wear your mask.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So sorry to say it, but
yes.
We are all the same here in the hall.
Yes, Mr. President, along with colleagues, while thanking you very much for joining us today and in welcoming the current peace stabilization intervention of EUFOR and NATO, as well as looking forward to the future prospect and to mutual advantage of your great country joining the European Union, do you agree, and following your own remarks, that there are three key elements, now perhaps agreed between your administration and the United States, which should be addressed and deployed this year? Firstly, a revision of Dayton to achieve necessary electoral reform. Secondly, equality of rights within your democracy. Thirdly, an extension of trade, culture, and cooperation agreements with other states and regions in order to support jobs, economic growth, and prosperity in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Thank you very much, Lord Dundee. And the next question, la prochaine oratrice est Madame Liliana Tanguy de la France au nom du groupe ADLE. Vous avez la parole, Madame Tanguy.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président Komsic, chers collègues, depuis plus de 30 ans et malgré la conclusion des accords de Dayton, la voie vers la paix en Bosnie-Herzégovine est pavée d'obstacles. En tant que membre du groupe d'amitié France-Bosnie-Herzégovine à l'Assemblée nationale, je suis jour après jour la situation dans votre pays. Et en ce début d'année, une partie de la Bosnie-Herzégovine célébrait la création de la République Srpska en prononçant des discours haineux, tandis que l'autre partie condamnait ces célébrations jugées inconstitutionnelles. Malgré ces événements inquiétants et très préoccupants, la communauté internationale ne parvient pas à faire front commun. La situation se dégrade et menace désormais la stabilité de l'ensemble de la région de l'Europe du Sud-Est. Face à ce contexte, Monsieur le Président, j'aimerais vous interroger au nom de mon groupe sur l'avenir du pays. Selon vous, quelle voie la Bosnie-Herzégovine, ses dirigeants et ses communautés doivent-elles prendre pour apaiser les tensions? Et de quelle manière la communauté internationale, l'Union européenne et plus encore le Conseil de l'Europe et notre Assemblée peuvent soutenir le pays dans cette voie? Et enfin, pour conclure, je souhaite rappeler que la présidence française de l'Union européenne organisera un sommet UE-Balkans occidentaux en juin prochain, un moment important voulu par le président Macron pour l'avenir de la région et de celui de la Bosnie-Herzégovine. Je vous remercie.
Merci à vous, Madame Tanguy. And now, before we get the reaction of the President of Bosnia and Herzegovina, we have the last question on behalf of the group of the UAL, posed by Mr. George Katrougalos from Greece. George, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I would like myself to welcome President Komsic to our Assembly. You are very right to say that imposed constitutions create problems when they are not freely decided by the people. We have seen that in Bosnia, we have seen that in Cyprus. And you are very right, I share much of your criticism for the complex system created after Dayton. How do you envisage to overcome these problems? Through a constituent assembly, beyond the ethnical division of the country? And how do you stand vis-à-vis recent interventions or initiatives from abroad? For instance, regarding the United States sanctions against Dodik, or what we are hearing recently about a joint initiative from Serbia and Turkey. Do you think that all these initiatives from abroad are conducive to your effort? Many thanks, Mr. President.
Many thanks to you, George. Mr. President, you have heard the 5 questions on behalf of the political groups. They cover a broad spectrum of issues. Could I please ask you to react to these questions? You have the floor, sir. Mr. President, please could you ask again for the floor? That's the way how the system here works. Then we can get you here in the assembly. Please ask for the floor. As you might see, dear colleagues, we have a connection problem. We are trying to solve it. One moment, please. We are still trying to restore the connection with President Komsic. Please, one more moment of your time to see whether we can solve this. Dear colleagues, modern technology allows us a lot, but not always at the right moment. We have lost a connection with the President of Bosnia and Herzegovina. I pity it very, very much because having presidents in our assembly is a great privilege, and having answers to our questions is even a greater privilege. I will propose to the President of Bosnia and Herzegovina, if he cannot restore the connection within a minute, that he answers in writing to the questions posed. And I also would propose that I also would propose that the chairman of the presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina is going to answer to questions of the other colleagues who are on our list. Of course, it's up to his decision, but I think that question and answering is part of this point of the agenda. But sorry that we cannot restore the connection with the President. I will propose that he answers in writing, and therefore we end this issue. Sorry again, but technology is not always our best friend, as I stated earlier. We still have to wait for the results of the election of a vice president to the Assembly, and I will check whether these results are available, and I can announce them to you. One moment. Chers collègues, je vous informe les résultats de l'élection de ce matin. Je vous informe que M. Piotr Tolstoy, n'ayant pas obtenu la majorité... n'a pas obtenu la majorité absolue des suffrages au premier tour. Alors nous allons procéder à un second tour au scrutin secret pour l'élection d'un vice-président de l'Assemblée au titre de la Fédération Russie. Les résultats sont comme ça. Votant au total 169, bulletins nuls ou blancs 12, suffrages exprimés 157, vote pour la majorité absolue 79. Les suffrages ont été exprimés comme suite 73. Je vous rappelle qu'au terme de l'article 41C de notre règlement, l'élection est acquise à la majorité relative. Si le candidat n'obtient pas le nombre suffisant de suffrages, ce siège de vice-président restera vacant jusqu'à un candidat présenté par la délégation russe obtienne la majorité requise. Les scrutins auront lieu par la voie électronique via la plateforme Skittle selon les mêmes modalités qu'au premier tour. Les scrutateurs désignés par chaque groupe politique au premier tour demeurent inchangés pour la suite de l'élection. Pour le groupe PPE, Madame Aberg de la Suède. Pour le groupe des socialistes, démocrates et verts, Madame Céline Sayek-Beuke. Pour le groupe ADLE, Madame Beatrice Fresco-Rolfo. Pour le groupe JUE, Monsieur Ishar Essoy. Et pour le groupe ECDA, Monsieur John Howell. Le scrutin est désormais ouvert. Il sera clos à 18 heures. Nous continuons notre travail pendant ce temps, mais pour ce moment, nous sommes à la fin de notre session et nous retournerons ici à quelle heure? 15h30. 15h30. Merci beaucoup.